Have you ever been in that moment where a single piece of criticism just completely derails your entire day? Maybe it was a comment from your boss about a project you poured your heart into, or a casual remark from a friend that hit a little too close to home. Suddenly, your confidence evaporates. You replay the words over and over, feeling that familiar knot in your stomach tighten. Your mood shifts, your focus shatters, and what started as a normal day spirals into self-doubt and frustration. It's a universal experience, one that leaves so many of us feeling vulnerable, exposed, and emotionally drained. We've all been there, crushed by words that seem to carry far more weight than they should. But what if I told you that this pain isn't inevitable? What if there was a way to not just endure criticism, but to emerge from it stronger, more centered, and truly unshaken? This isn't about building a thick skin or simply ignoring what others say. It's about understanding why criticism affects us so deeply in the first place and rewiring our response from the inside out. The ancient Stoic philosopher Epictetus once said, "We are disturbed not by things, but by the views which we take of them." Let that sink in for a moment. It isn't the criticism itself that causes our suffering. It's the meaning we assign to it, the story we tell ourselves about what those words say about our worth, our abilities, our place in the world. That insight is the foundation of everything we're going to explore together. It's the key that unlocks a more resilient way of living, and in this video, we're going to go beyond theory. We're going to walk through a powerful, practical method called Stoic Layering, a step-by-step technique to help you build emotional immunity, piece by piece, so that criticism loses its power to throw you off balance. We'll start by breaking down exactly why criticism stings the way it does, tapping into psychology and timeless wisdom to make sense of those raw, reactive emotions. Then we'll shift to the core Stoic perspective, how to reframe not just the words others say, but the very way you perceive yourself and your values. And finally, we'll get into the actionable layers, simple, repeatable practices you can use to fortify your mind, maintain your composure, and respond from a place of strength rather than defensiveness or despair. This isn't about becoming indifferent or cold. It's about cultivating a profound inner stability that allows you to hear feedback without letting it break you, to sift through what's useful and release what isn't, all while staying grounded in your purpose and self-worth. If you're ready to transform the way you handle criticism and step into a calmer, more confident version of yourself, you're in the right place. Let's begin this journey. So why does a few seconds of feedback, sometimes from someone we might not even respect, have the power to overshadow hours of positive reinforcement? It feels irrational in the moment, and yet the reaction is so visceral, so automatic. To understand this, we have to travel back in time, way back to when our ancestors lived in small, tight-knit tribes. In that environment, social acceptance wasn't just about feelings. It was a matter of life and death. Being ostracized from the group meant facing the wilderness alone, without protection, without help gathering food, without a tribe to watch your back. That meant almost certain death, so our brains evolved an incredibly sensitive alarm system designed to alert us the instant we perceived a threat to our social standing. A sharp word, a disapproving glance, these were not mere insults. They were early warning signals of potential exile. This ancient wiring is still incredibly active within us today. When we receive criticism, that same alarm bell rings. It's called an amygdala hijack. The amygdala is the part of our brain responsible for processing emotions, particularly fear and threat. When it perceives a social threat like criticism, it can essentially shut down our higher, rational thinking, and trigger a flood of stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. This is that feeling. Your heart starts to pound, your face flushes, your thoughts start to race or go completely blank. You're not being overly sensitive. You're experiencing a primal survival response to what your nervous system mistakenly interprets as a danger to your very existence. Your body is preparing to fight, to flee, or to freeze. But there's another, more modern layer to this pain: our ego and our identity. We live in a world that constantly tells us to tie our self-worth to our achievements, our jobs, our relationships, and our social status. We attach our identity to these external things, so when someone criticizes our work, it doesn't feel like they're just commenting on a single project. In that hijacked state, it feels like they are criticizing our intelligence, our capability, our very essence. If your sense of self is wrapped up in being a great employee, a critical comment from your boss doesn't just challenge your performance on a task, it challenges your core identity. It feels like an attack on who you are. The Stoics pinpointed this exact problem 2,000 years ago. They observed that our suffering begins the moment we mistakenly place our value, our self-esteem, into the hands of other people and external outcomes, things we ultimately cannot control. This creates a fragile foundation for our sense of worth. It's like building a house on sand. Every wave of opinion, every casual comment, has the power to erode the ground beneath us. The Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius constantly reminded himself to separate his actions from the opinions of others. He wrote in his private journal, "It never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinion than our own." Think about the profound truth in that. We are so quick to prioritize an external judgment over our own internal compass. So I want you to take a brief moment and reflect on this. Think back to the last time a piece of criticism, big or small, really ruined your day, got under your skin and stayed there. Now ask yourself, what was it about that specific comment that caused so much turmoil? What part of your identity felt threatened? Was it your view of yourself as a competent professional, a good friend, a capable parent? By identifying that attachment, you take the first crucial step toward reclaiming your power. You begin to see that the pain isn't in the words themselves, but in the part of you that you've tied to those words. You start the process of moving your self-worth from that shaky, external ground to something solid, internal, and unshakable. Stoicism offers a startling perspective. Criticism isn't good or bad, it's indifferent. This might sound counterintuitive at first. How can something that feels so painful, so personal, be considered neutral? The Stoics developed a powerful framework for understanding the world, dividing everything into two distinct categories: things within our control and things not within our control. They called the things outside our control externals, or indifferents. This doesn't mean they are unimportant or that we shouldn't care about them. It means they lack the inherent power to make us good or bad, virtuous or flawed. Our health, our possessions, our reputation, and most definitely the opinions and criticisms of other people, these are all classic examples of indifference. They are events and circumstances that happen to us, not parts of our essential character. The Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius meditated on this constantly. He would remind himself that the noise of other people's judgments was not his business. In his personal writings, which we now call meditations, he wrote, "It never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinion than our own." He saw this as a fundamental error in human judgment. He argued that another person's opinion is a product of their own mind, their own biases, their own limited perspective and experiences, things he had zero control over. To fret over it was as pointless as being upset by the weather. His concern, he decided, was solely with his own choices, his own actions, and his own judgments. Were they just? Were they courageous? Were they temperate? That was his domain. The applause or the criticism that followed was simply not his to manage. This is where our suffering truly begins. We misplace our value. We take something that is by nature an external event, a few words spoken by another person, and we internalize it, weaving it into the story we tell about who we are. We treat criticism not as data about a single action, but as a verdict on our entire being. Imagine you're holding a priceless diamond. Someone throws a handful of mud at you. The mud splatters on the surface of the diamond, but it doesn't diminish the diamond's value. It just needs to be cleaned off. Our core self, our character, is that diamond. Criticism is the mud. The Stoic shift is realizing that the mud has no power to change the worth of the gem. Our error is in believing the mud has somehow devalued it, and we then spend hours, even days, agonizing over the dirt instead of simply wiping it away and remembering the brilliance beneath. This misplacement of value creates a fragile, exhausting existence. We build our self-esteem on a foundation of shifting sand, constantly seeking validation and fearing any dissent. Every critical comment feels like an earthquake because our entire sense of stability is built on the approval of others, something we can never reliably control. The Stoic alternative is to build your self-worth on the solid rock of your own virtue and intentions. Did you act with good intention? Did you do your best with the knowledge and resources you had at the time? If you can honestly say yes, then any criticism that arrives is merely information. It might be useful information that helps you do better next time, or it might be useless noise. But it is not a judgment on your core character unless you choose to accept it as one. This shift doesn't make you cold or unfeeling, it makes you free. You become the sole author of your self-worth, no longer handing the pen to every critic you meet. This brings us to the first and most crucial layer of building your immunity, creating cognitive distance. This is the practice of inserting a tiny, powerful pause between the criticism you receive and your emotional reaction to it. It's about learning to separate the raw, objective event from the elaborate story we instantly build around it. The Stoic teacher Epictetus, who was born a slave and gained his freedom through philosophy, laid the foundation for this entire practice with one of his most famous teachings. It's not what happens to you, but how you react that matters. He wasn't saying that events are meaningless. He was pointing to the immense, often overlooked power we have in that space between the event and our response. That space is where our freedom lies. So how do we actually do this when our amygdala is sounding the alarm? We become forensic scientists of our own experience. We take the criticism and we dissect it with calm precision. Your goal is to strip the comment down to its barest, most neutral facts. What were the exact words that were spoken or written? Then you consciously separate those facts from your interpretation, your judgment, and the story you're already starting to tell yourself about what those words mean. Let's use the example from the outline. Your boss looks over a report you submitted and says, "This work is sloppy." That's the event, that's the factual data. It is a string of words, but what happens in our minds microseconds later? We don't hear, "This work is sloppy." We hear a story that translates into, "I am incompetent." My boss thinks I'm a bad employee. I'm going to get fired. I'll never succeed here. We have taken a comment about a single piece of work and we've inflated it into a catastrophic verdict on our entire professional identity and future. The pain and the panic don't come from the words, "This work is sloppy." They come from the story, "I am incompetent." The practice of cognitive distance is the act of catching yourself in the middle of that story-making process and gently pulling it apart. You literally talk to yourself, either in your mind or out loud. You say, okay, the fact is, my boss said the words "this work is sloppy." That is the observable event. Now, my interpretation is that this means I am incompetent and my job is at risk. Just by naming these two things separately, you instantly create that vital space. You shine a light on the fact that the interpretation is not the fact. It is just one possible story you are telling. It might be true, but it also might be completely false. Perhaps your boss is having an incredibly stressful day and is taking it out on minor errors. Perhaps they have a different standard for formatting that they never communicated. Perhaps sloppy refers to 2 typos on page 3, not the entire analytical framework you built. The story of your total incompetence is just that, a story, and often a worst-case scenario one at that. This isn't about dismissing the feedback. It's about depersonalizing it long enough to evaluate it rationally. Once you have the bare fact separated from the emotional story, you can then decide what to do with it from a place of choice, not panic. You can ask yourself, is there any useful data here? Is there an action I can take to improve this specific piece of work? If the answer is yes, you can accept that data without accepting the catastrophic story. You can calmly correct the typos or ask for clarification on formatting standards. If, after examination, the criticism seems unfounded or is just someone's bad opinion, you can file it away as irrelevant noise and let it go, because it was never about your core worth to begin with. The goal is to move from a reactive state where you feel attacked to a responsive state where you are thoughtfully assessing information. This single layer of practice, consistently applied, can dramatically reduce the emotional charge of criticism and give you back your power and your peace of mind in any situation. The practice of cognitive distance gives you the initial pause, the moment to separate fact from fiction. But to truly become immune to criticism, you need more than just a pause. You need a permanent, unshakable sanctuary within your own mind. The Stoics, and particularly the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius, had a powerful concept for this: the inner citadel. Picture a fortress not made of stone and mortar, but of your core principles and your unwavering sense of self. This is a mental stronghold that no external event, no harsh word, and no critical opinion can ever breach. It's the ultimate source of resilience. Marcus Aurelius is perhaps the most famous example of this idea in action. He didn't write his private thoughts, which we now call meditations, from a place of peace and quiet. He was the most powerful man in the known world, leading the Roman Empire through constant warfare, political intrigue, plague, and immense personal loss. His journal was his daily practice of retreating into his inner citadel to find stability amidst the chaos. He was literally building his mental fortress while surrounded on all sides by turmoil. He wrote, "People look for retreats for themselves in the country, by the coast, or in the hills. But this is altogether uncharacteristic of a philosopher, since you can retreat into yourself whenever you like. Nowhere can a person find a more peaceful and untroubled retreat than in his own mind, so constantly give yourself this retreat and renew yourself." Let's break down what this means for you today. Your inner citadel isn't about building walls to keep the world out. It's about fortifying your center so that whatever happens outside doesn't dictate your internal state. The bricks and mortar of this citadel are your core values and your intentional judgments. Every time you choose to act with integrity, even when no one is watching, you add a brick. Every time you consciously decide that your self-worth comes from your effort and your character, not from the outcome, you reinforce the walls. The voices of criticism are like weather outside the fortress. They can be loud, they can be stormy, but they cannot disturb the peace and stability within unless you open the gate and invite them in. This is the profound shift. Resilience isn't built by trying to control the external world. by hoping people stop criticizing you or by performing perfectly to avoid it. That's a battle you will always lose. True resilience is built by turning inward and focusing all your energy on the one thing you truly can control, your own mind and your reactions. When you know with absolute certainty that your value is determined by your virtues, your courage, your justice, your discipline, your wisdom, then the opinion of another person becomes like a report on the weather outside. You might hear that it's raining, but you don't take it personally. You simply put on a coat or decide to stay inside. Their criticism might be useful data about the external climate, but it has no power to make you feel cold and wet on the inside unless you let it. Cultivating this inner self is an active, daily practice. It begins with the simple but powerful act of defining your values for yourself. What matters most to you? Is it honesty, kindness, diligence, growth? Write them down. Get crystal clear on what your own personal citadel is built upon. Then, each morning, you can make a conscious choice to align your actions with those values. And each evening, you can reflect not on what people said about you, but on whether you lived up to your own standards. Did you do your best? Did you act with good intention? This reflection reinforces the walls. When criticism comes, you don't have to scramble for a defense. You can simply look inward and ask, did I violate my own code? If the answer is no, the criticism holds no weight. It is merely noise. If the answer is yes, then the criticism has given you a valuable opportunity to realign with your values and strengthen your citadel even further. This is how you move from being a victim of external events to being the unwavering guardian of your own peace. Now that you have the foundation of that inner citadel, the unshakable sense of self built on your own virtues, we move to the next critical layer, managing the initial, visceral surge of emotion that criticism triggers. This is where theory meets the tidal wave of practice. You can understand Stoic philosophy perfectly, but if a harsh comment still sends your heart racing and your face flushing, that knowledge can feel useless in the moment. This layer is about emotional detachment, and it's not about becoming a cold, unfeeling robot. It's about creating a crucial gap between the sting of the criticism and your reaction to it. It's the difference between being a leaf blown about by a storm and being the tree that bends but does not break. The Stoic philosopher Seneca wrote extensively about this, particularly in his work on anger. He described anger as a brief insanity that arrives swiftly and clouds our judgment completely. He wasn't advocating for the suppression of emotion. He was a realist who understood that the first spark of feeling is often involuntary. We can't stop the initial flush of heat. What we can control is what we do next. He advised creating a delay, any delay between that first spark and the action we take. He suggested that we must not believe the initial impression, not fuel it, but instead force ourselves to wait. The greatest remedy for anger is delay, he wrote. By imposing this pause, you allow the initial, irrational wave to subside so that your rational mind can come back online and decide how to proceed. Think of it like this. When you receive a painful criticism, your emotional brain receives the signal first. It's like a dedicated emergency line that rings with a loud, jarring alarm. Your rational brain, the part that can assess and reason, is on a different line. It's a regular phone that takes a few extra rings to pick up. Emotional detachment is the practice of letting that emergency line ring without immediately answering it. You acknowledge its ringing, but you consciously decide to wait for the other line to pick up before you have a conversation. This simple act of waiting is a superpower. So what does this look like in a modern, everyday scenario? Let's take the example of the critical email. You're going about your day feeling productive, and then you see it pop into your inbox. The subject line alone might make your stomach drop. Your name is in the to field and it's CC'd to your boss. You open it and the words feel like little daggers. Every sentence seems designed to attack your competence. The ancient amygdala hijack begins. Your breathing gets shallow, your muscles tense, and your fingers fly to the keyboard, ready to fire off a defensive, angry, or wounded reply that will almost certainly make the situation worse. This is the precise moment to deploy the Stoic pause. Your first and most important job is to not hit send. Not now, not for a while. You physically push back from your desk. You close your laptop lid, or at the very least, you close the email tab. You have just created the gap that Seneca talked about. You have refused to believe the initial, furious impression. Now you need a technique to widen that gap, to calm your nervous system and allow your rational mind to catch up. This is where simple, physical anchors come in. Take 3 slow, deep breaths, not shallow chest breaths, but deep diaphragmatic breaths that fill your belly. Inhale for a count of 4, hold for 4, exhale for a count of 6. This isn't just new age advice, it's basic physiology. It stimulates your vagus nerve, which tells your body to stand down from its high alert state, slowing your heart rate and calming the fight or flight response. If you need to, literally count to 10 or 20 or 50. The goal is to ride out the initial biochemical wave of anger, shame, or defensiveness. Now, with a slightly clearer head, you can begin to apply the cognitive distance we discussed earlier. You can look at the email not as a personal attack, but as a text to be analyzed. What are the factual claims being made? Separate the data from the tone. Is the sender frustrated? Are they under pressure themselves? Is there, buried beneath the harsh language, a single piece of actionable feedback that you can use? By treating the email as an external event to be examined rather than a verdict to be reacted to, you completely change your relationship to it. This is the essence of emotional detachment. What if you could treat criticism like bad weather? You notice the dark clouds rolling in, you hear the thunder, you feel the wind pick up, you acknowledge it's happening. But you don't shake your fist at the sky and demand it stop. You don't internalize the storm and decide that because it's raining, you are a bad person. You simply observe it, you put on a coat or decide to stay inside until it passes, and you understand that it is a temporary condition of the external world that has no power to ruin your inner peace unless you choose to stand out in the downpour without protection. The critical email is the storm, your breath, your pause, your rational analysis. That is your coat. It allows you to notice the weather without letting it dictate your inner climate. You respond from a place of choice, not a place of chaotic reaction, and in doing so, you reclaim your power and your peace. We've built our inner fortress and learned to manage that initial emotional surge. But there's another powerful layer we can add, one that fundamentally changes the entire landscape of criticism. It involves making a simple but profound shift in our focus away from ourselves and onto the person offering the feedback. The Roman Stoic Seneca offered a brilliant insight into human behavior that is as true today as it was 2,000 years ago. He observed that when people hurl insults or criticism, they are very often projecting their own internal struggles, their own frustrations, and their own unresolved issues onto others. He suggested that a person who is deeply unhappy with themselves lacks the inner peace required to offer calm, constructive feedback. Their criticism then becomes less a commentary on you and more a window into their own troubled state of mind. Think of it like this. Imagine someone standing in a muddy field, desperately trying to clean themselves off. As they flail about, they inevitably splash mud all over everyone standing nearby. Are you covered in mud? Yes, but was the mud actually intended for you? Not really. It was a byproduct of their own frantic, unsuccessful attempt to get clean. Their criticism is the mud. Your mistake is in taking it personally, in believing you were the specific target, when in reality, you were just standing nearby when they lost control of their own emotional state. This perspective doesn't excuse rude or unprofessional behavior, but it does drain that behavior of its personal power to wound you. It becomes their mud, not your stain. This is an incredibly liberating realization. It allows you to depersonalize the feedback almost instantly, instead of internalizing the words and asking, "What's wrong with me?" You can externally analyze the situation and ask, "What's happening with them?" This shifts you from a defensive posture to an almost anthropological curiosity. You become a detective of motive and context, which is a far more empowered and far less painful position to be in. Let's apply this to a very common scenario. Your boss comes into your office, their jaw tight and their tone short. They quickly review your work and snap, "This isn't good enough. You need to be more detail-oriented." This is sloppy. The old reactive you would immediately crumble, internalizing this as a definitive judgment on your professional competence. The new, stoically layered, you would hear the same words but would immediately begin to contextualize them. You might know that your boss is under immense pressure from their own superior to deliver impossible results on a collapsing timeline. You might have heard they're dealing with a personal crisis at home. You might simply observe their body language, the tension, the lack of eye contact, the hurried pace, and realize this outburst has very little to do with the commas on page 7 of your report and everything to do with the storm raging inside of them. Their criticism in this moment is not a measured assessment of your work. It is a verbalization of their own stress and overwhelm. It's about their world, not your reality. The feedback itself might still contain a kernel of useful data. Maybe there was a typo you missed, but the delivery and the emotional charge around it belong entirely to the critic. This practice is not about cynically dismissing all feedback or assuming everyone is perpetually unstable. It's about developing wisdom and discernment. It's about understanding that every piece of criticism comes through a filter. The filter of the other person's mood, their upbringing, their biases, their knowledge, their fears, and their current circumstances. A wine connoisseur and a casual drinker will have completely different critiques of the same bottle. The wine itself hasn't changed, the filters of the tasters are different. When someone criticizes you, you are receiving data that has passed through the complex filter of their entire life experience. Your job is to gently separate the potential signal, the useful information about the external world, from the overwhelming noise of their personal filter. So the next time criticism lands, I want you to pause and ask yourself a powerful reflective question. Don't ask, "Why are they doing this to me?" Instead, ask, "How might this criticism reflect the critic's world rather than my reality?" This single question can instantly dissolve resentment and short-circuit an emotional spiral. It allows you to receive the words without accepting the toxic emotional payload that may have been attached to them. You can acknowledge the comment, evaluate it for any potential usefulness, and then release the rest, understanding that it was never truly yours to carry in the first place. You stop absorbing the emotional baggage of everyone around you, and in doing so, you preserve your energy, your focus, and most importantly, your peace. This brings us to the third and perhaps most transformative layer of Stoic immunity, the practice of value assessment. We've created cognitive distance to separate fact from story, and we've cultivated emotional detachment to manage our initial reactions. Now, we need a definitive compass to guide our response, a way to determine what in this entire situation is actually worthy of our energy and attention. For this, we turn to the foundational Stoic tool known as the dichotomy of control, a concept most famously articulated by the philosopher Epictetus. He began his essential handbook, the Enchiridion, with this very idea. Some things are within our power while others are not. Within our power are opinion, motivation, desire, aversion, and, in a word, whatever is of our own doing. Not within our power are our body, our property, our reputation, our office, and, in a word, whatever is not of our own doing. This isn't just philosophical jargon. It's a profoundly practical filter for every experience, especially criticism. Epictetus is drawing a bright, clear line through the chaos of life. On one side of the line is our inner world, our judgments, our values, our intentions, our efforts, and our voluntary actions. This is our exclusive domain, the only realm where we have complete and total sovereignty. On the other side of the line is everything else, the actions of other people, the outcomes of our efforts, our reputation, our status, and of course, the opinions and criticisms that others hold about us. These are externals. We can influence them, we can hope for certain outcomes, but we cannot ultimately control them. Trying to do so is the root of nearly all our anxiety and frustration. Resilience, then, is not a mysterious quality you're born with. It is the direct result of training your attention to focus relentlessly on your side of the line and to accept with grace whatever happens on the other side. Let's make this incredibly concrete with a modern parallel that nearly everyone can relate to: social media. Imagine you spend hours creating a piece of content, a video, an article, a piece of art that you are genuinely proud of. It's thoughtful, it's aligned with your values, and it represents your best effort. You post it. Now you have two potential focuses. You can focus on what is within your control, the quality of the work you created, the intention behind it, the effort you put in, and the integrity of your message. Or you can focus on what is not within your control, the number of likes, the comments, both positive and negative, the share count, the algorithm's decision to promote it or bury it. Where do you think your peace of mind lies? If your sense of success and self-worth is tied to the likes and the positive comments, you have handed your emotional well-being over to a random collection of strangers and a piece of software. You are building your house on a foundation of sand that shifts with EVERY Chinese letter OF public opinion. But if your sense of success is tied to the act of creation itself, to having made something true to yourself, then you are unshakable. The likes become a pleasant bonus, the critical comments become irrelevant noise. You did your part, the rest is not your business. This exact same framework applies directly to interpersonal criticism. When your colleague questions your idea in a meeting, what is within your control? You control how well you prepared. You control the clarity and respect with which you present your idea. You control your willingness to listen to other perspectives and to engage in a constructive debate. You control your own reaction to their feedback, whether you get defensive or remain open. What is not within your control? Their tone of voice, their personal biases that color their perception, their bad mood from an argument they had that morning, their ultimate opinion of you and your idea, their decision to agree or disagree. Wasting your mental energy agonizing over these externals is like trying to change the direction of the wind. A resilient person doesn't do that. They simply adjust their sails. They pour all their effort into what they can command, their own preparation, their own delivery, their own composure, and they release any attachment to how it is received. The practice of value assessment is the active, moment-to-moment application of this dichotomy. It's a mental habit you cultivate. The next time criticism lands, your first internal move is to perform this quick sorting exercise. Mentally take the entire situation and run it through the filter of control. Sort each element into one of two piles: mine to manage and not mine to manage. The other person's tone, not yours, their mood, not yours, their past experiences that shaped their view, not yours, their choice to offer feedback constructively or destructively. Largely not yours. Your pile, the mind-to-manage pile, is smaller but infinitely more powerful. It contains your self-talk, your breathing, your decision to seek clarification, your choice to look for a useful kernel of truth, and your commitment to not letting this derail your day. By consciously doing this, you are actively choosing where to invest your precious energy. You stop pouring it into the bottomless pit of trying to control the uncontrollable, and you start channeling it into the one place where it can actually make a difference, your own mind and your own actions. This is how you build a resilience that is proactive, not reactive, a strength that comes from a deep and unwavering understanding of where your true power actually lies. There's one final, master-level Stoic practice that ties all of these layers together, transforming your relationship with criticism from a defensive game into a proactive strength. It's called Premeditatio Malorum, which translates from Latin to the premeditation of evils or adversities. Now, that might sound bleak or pessimistic at first glance, like sitting around and worrying about everything that could possibly go wrong. But that's a complete misunderstanding of its purpose. This isn't about fostering anxiety. It's about strategically vaccinating your mind against the shock of the unexpected. It is the ultimate form of mental rehearsal, a way to drain future criticisms of their power to surprise and destabilize you by meeting them on your own terms, in the safety of your own imagination, long before they ever arrive. The Stoics weren't morbid pessimists, they were supreme realists. They understood that a life without any adversity is a fantasy. Challenges, setbacks, and yes, criticism are not anomalies in an otherwise smooth journey. They are an intrinsic part of the human experience. Seneca, who was one of the wealthiest and most powerful men in Rome, would regularly practice this. He would visualize himself losing his status, his wealth, and even his health. He didn't do this to make himself miserable. He did it to discover a profound truth. He found that by mentally rehearsing these losses, he not lessened the fear of them, but he also realized that his core self, his virtue and his character, would remain intact even if everything external was stripped away. He once wrote about preparing for insults or exile, noting that by rehearsing these scenarios, we are never more often overcome than by the unexpected. The shock of the unforeseen event is what truly overwhelms us. By removing the element of surprise, we reclaim our composure. So how do we apply this specifically to the fear of criticism? You actively and calmly envision scenarios where you receive harsh, unfair, or deeply uncomfortable feedback. The key is to not just imagine the event itself, but to vividly picture your ideal, stoically layered response. You are not rehearsing the pain, you are rehearsing your own calm, measured, and empowered reaction. This process does something remarkable to your brain. It moves the experience from the realm of a terrifying, unknown threat into the category of a familiar, manageable situation. You've already walked through it. When it happens in reality, it feels less like an ambush and more like a drill you've successfully run before. Let's take a common professional fear, giving a big presentation. The night before, instead of lying awake anxiously hoping for applause and positive feedback, you engage in Premeditatio Malorum. You close your eyes and you visualize it. You see yourself finishing your talk. You picture a senior person in the audience raising their hand, their expression skeptical. You hear them say, "I have to be honest, I found this analysis to be shallow and unconvincing." It completely missed the mark on our core objectives. In your mental rehearsal, you feel that initial jolt of adrenaline. You allow that to happen because it's natural. But then you see yourself taking that deep, centering breath. You feel your feet firmly on the floor. You watch as you nod calmly and respond not with defensiveness but with curiosity. You hear yourself say, "Thank you for that direct feedback. Could you help me understand which part of the analysis felt like it missed the mark for you? I'd appreciate your perspective so I can deepen it." In this visualization, the criticism doesn't break you. It becomes a point of dialogue. You remain the calm, composed expert in the room, not because you are perfect, but because you are prepared. This practice rewires your nervous system. By repeatedly exposing yourself to the idea of criticism in a controlled environment, you desensitize yourself to its emotional impact. It's the psychological equivalent of a vaccine. You are injecting a small, harmless dose of the virus to build up your immunity. When the real event occurs, your body doesn't go into full-scale panic mode because the scenario is not novel, it's familiar. You've already visited this moment a dozen times in your mind and emerged unscathed. This allows you to access the cognitive and emotional layers we've built: the distance, the detachment, the value assessment immediately, rather than having to fight for them through a fog of shock. So I want to leave you with a final, powerful, reflective question to shift your entire mindset. Instead of dreading criticism and hoping it never comes, ask yourself, how would I choose to respond if I not only expected criticism, but saw it as an inevitable and even useful part of the process? How would my posture change if I walked into that meeting or sent that email fully anticipating that someone might challenge it, and being completely prepared with my calm, curious, and unshakable response already practiced and ready to go? This flips the script entirely. You are no longer a passive victim waiting for the blow to land. You are an active participant, mentally fortified and strategically prepared for a range of outcomes. You move from a position of fear to a position of quiet confidence, not because you expect to be perfect, but because you know you can handle whatever comes next. This fourth layer, virtue alignment, is where we reach the very heart of Stoic immunity. It's the ultimate anchor, moving beyond techniques and frameworks to the core of your character. All the previous layers, the cognitive distance, the emotional detachment, the value assessment, are designed to protect you. But this layer is about what you're protecting, a self that is so grounded in its own moral compass that external opinions simply cannot define it. The Stoics identified 4 cardinal virtues as the pillars of an excellent character: wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. Living in accordance with these virtues, they argued, is the sole good. Everything else, praise, blame, success, failure, is merely a preferred or dispreferred indifferent. Your job is not to be liked or universally approved of. Your job is to be good. This principle was the bedrock of Marcus Aurelius's entire life. As emperor, he was arguably one of the most criticized people on the planet, subject to whispers in the Senate, grumbling in the army, and outright slander from his political enemies. He couldn't control that, so what did he focus on? He focused on his own virtue. In his private writings, he constantly returned to this touchstone. He wrote, "You can commit justice and generosity all at once, and in so doing be satisfied with yourself. Always, at every moment, make this your only work, and you can hope for a life worth living." Notice the language, be satisfied with yourself. His satisfaction, his sense of a life well lived, came from the internal knowledge that he had acted with justice and generosity. The applause or the hisses that followed were irrelevant to that core satisfaction. Another powerful entry reads, "I do my duty. Other things do not trouble me, for they are either without life or without reason, or have lost the road and are ignorant." The criticisms of others fell into that category for him. They were the actions of those who were perhaps ignorant or had lost their way. His peace came from knowing he had done his duty. Let's make this incredibly practical. Imagine you're a manager and you have to make a difficult but necessary decision to restructure your team, which will unfortunately lead to a layoff. You know this decision is it's for the long-term health of the company and will secure the jobs of the remaining employees. You know it requires courage. It's an unpleasant task that you must face directly and compassionately. You use wisdom to execute it in the fairest way possible, and temperance to manage your own emotions and avoid cruelty. After you deliver the news, you are met with a wave of criticism. Some is constructive from those who are understandably upset but offer feedback on the process. Some is outright malicious, personal attacks questioning your character and motives. A person whose self-worth is tied to external validation would be completely shattered by this. They would internalize all of it, questioning whether they are indeed a bad person, and might even reverse the necessary decision to try and win back approval. But a person anchored in virtue alignment handles this with profound stability. They can look at the constructive criticism and, with wisdom, ask, was there a more just way I could have handled the communication? Is there something I can learn here to act with more compassion next time? They can accept that useful data to refine their virtue. Then they can look at the malicious personal attacks and, with that same virtue as their shield, simply let it pass by. They know in their bones that they acted with justice, courage, and temperance to the best of their ability. The malicious noise cannot stick because it does not align with their internal truth. It's not about them, it's about the other person's pain being projected outward. This is the power of the final, reflective question you can ask yourself whenever criticism lands. Instead of the ego-driven question, how dare they, or the insecure question, what's wrong with me, you ask a virtue-based question. Is this criticism pointing to a real flaw in my character or my actions, or is it just noise? This question forces a truthful inventory. You must consult your own virtues. Did I act with wisdom, or was I rash? Did I act with justice, or was I unfair? Did I act with courage, or did I avoid my duty? Did I act with temperance, or was I excessive? If your honest answer is that you upheld your virtues, then the criticism, especially the harsh and unfair kind, loses all power. It becomes irrelevant. It's like someone shouting that the sky is green. You might hear the sound, but you don't feel the need to argue because you trust the evidence of your own eyes. Your virtue is your evidence. If your honest answer reveals a misstep, then the criticism, however poorly delivered, has given you a precious gift, a chance to course correct and realign with your highest self. In either case, you win. You are no longer a passive recipient of judgment but an active, discerning architect of your own character, using every interaction as material to build a more resilient and virtuous life. This brings us to one of the most empowering skills you can develop, the art of selective listening. All of the layers we've built, the cognitive distance, the emotional citadel, the value assessment, culminate in this final, decisive action. It's the moment you move from being a passive receptacle for every opinion that comes your way to becoming an active, discerning curator of your own growth. The Stoics were not advocates for ignoring the world. They were masters of discernment, of knowing what to let in and what to leave at the door. The philosopher Epictetus, who himself taught from a position of having no social status or power, offered a brilliantly simple filter for this. He said, if a person gave your body to any stranger he met on his way, you would certainly be angry. And do you feel no shame in handing over your own mind to be confused and mystified by anyone who happens to verbally attack you? He's pointing to a profound truth. We guard our physical property with fierce intention, but we often leave the gates to our mind wide open for any passerby to dump their emotional trash inside. Selective listening is the practice of becoming the gatekeeper of your own mind. Epictetus gave very clear instructions on who deserves entry through that gate. He advised his students to only truly listen to those who speak with both wisdom and good intent. Think about those two criteria for a moment. Wisdom means the person has knowledge, experience, or insight relevant to the topic at hand. Good intent means their primary motivation is to help you improve, not to hurt you, elevate themselves, or simply vent their own frustrations. When feedback meets both of these standards, it is a gift, even if it's difficult to hear. It is pure gold, but the vast majority of criticism we encounter in life fails one or both of these tests. It might come from a place of ignorance, someone offering an opinion on a topic they know nothing about. Or it might come with malicious intent designed to wound, to control, or to undermine. That kind of feedback is not gold, it's just dirt, and your job is not to painstakingly sort through every single grain of dirt that gets thrown at you in the hopes of finding one tiny fleck of gold. Your job is to recognize the dirt for what it is and refuse to let it dirty your mind. This is where the powerful metaphor of sifting comes in. Imagine you are a gold prospector standing in a river. Your pan is your mind. Someone upstream shovels a large pile of sediment into the water. This is the criticism. It's a messy mix of rocks, mud, sand, and maybe, just maybe, a few small flakes of gold. The unskilled prospector, the people pleaser, feels obligated to keep every single thing that lands in their pan. They carefully examine each rock, each clump of mud, believing that if they just hold onto it all, they'll be thorough and polite. But all they've done is weigh themselves down with useless, heavy baggage. The skilled prospector, the stoic, knows the process. They dip their pan into the water and they begin to swirl it with a gentle, rhythmic motion. The water washes away the lighter, worthless material, the mud, the sand, the petty insults, the ignorant comments, the malicious jabs. They let it all go without a second thought. What remains at the bottom are the heavier elements, the rocks of harsh but potentially useful truth, and if you're lucky, the genuine gold of wise, constructive feedback. Only then do they lean in for a closer look. You can apply this sifting process in real time with one incredibly practical and simple question. The next time criticism comes your way, before you even engage with it emotionally, before you let it pass the gate, you ask yourself internally, does this help me grow? This question is your panning motion. It immediately separates the valuable from the worthless. If the answer is a clear yes, if the feedback is specific, actionable, and comes from a credible source with good intentions, then you can welcome it in, thank the person for it, and use it to improve. If the answer is no, if it's vague, insulting, ignorant, or clearly designed to cause pain, then you simply let it wash away. You acknowledge that you heard the words, but why you Chinese letter THEM, no wait, you grant them no residence in your mind. You might even respond with a simple, unemotional, thank you for sharing that, which is not an endorsement of the content but a reflection of your own composure. This question, does this help me grow, puts you back in the driver's seat. It makes you the evaluator, the judge, the one who decides what is worthy of your attention and energy. This practice naturally leads to a final, crucial step, consciously identifying the very small number of people in your life whose opinions truly matter. In a world of 7 billion voices, it is exhausting and utterly pointless to try and manage everyone's perception of you. Resilience comes from radical selectivity. Take a moment to think about your own life, whose opinion, when offered with wisdom and good intent, actually holds weight for you. For most people, this list is remarkably short. It might include a trusted mentor who has proven their wisdom time and again. It might include a spouse or partner who knows you intimately and wants the best for you. It might include a handful of close colleagues whose professional judgment you deeply respect, and it should absolutely include your own wiser, future self, the person you are striving to become. Anyone outside this carefully chosen circle is essentially a stranger shouting from the riverbank. You can hear the noise, but you have no obligation to try and decipher their message, or, worse, to swim over and invite them into your boat. By consciously defining your personal board of advisors, you free yourself from the tyranny of trying to please everyone. You redirect all that wasted energy into listening more deeply to the few voices that can actually help you navigate your journey, and most importantly, into listening to the quiet, confident voice of your own virtuous character. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher emperor, developed a profound mental exercise to confront the overwhelming pressures of his reign, a practice he called taking the view from above, or seeing things sub specie eternitatis, from the perspective of eternity. He would consciously pull his mind away from the immediate, often petty dramas of the imperial court and envision the entire world from a great height, watching the comings and goings of humanity as if they were a swarm of ants. He would then expand his view further to see the Earth as a mere pale blue dot in the vastness of the cosmos, and then further still, contemplating the immense, unfathomable stretch of time. From this vantage point, the day's insults, the political squabbles, the critical memos, all of it shrank into utter insignificance. This fifth and final layer of Stoic immunity, temporal perspective, is about voluntarily adopting that cosmic viewpoint to drain the immediate sting of criticism of all its false urgency and exaggerated importance. We have a natural tendency to magnify the present moment, to treat whatever is happening right now as the most important thing that has ever happened. It's a cognitive distortion, a trick of the mind that makes a critical email feel like a world-ending event. Temporal perspective is the antidote to this myopia. It's the conscious act of zooming out, of placing the event on the vast timeline of your life and the even vaster timeline of human history. When you do this, something remarkable happens. That harsh comment, which moments ago felt like a canyon carved through your day, suddenly looks like what it truly is. A tiny, almost invisible speck on the long, rich continuum of your existence. Let's make this incredibly tangible. Find a quiet moment and try this visualization. Picture your entire life laid out on a timeline from your birth to the present day. Now imagine projecting that timeline forward into your future. See all the experiences yet to come, the friendships you'll deepen, the skills you'll master, the places you'll visit, the challenges you'll overcome and learn from. Now locate today on that timeline. It's a single point. Now locate this exact moment of receiving criticism. It's a microscopic dot on that point. From this zoomed-out perspective, does that dot still have the power to dominate the entire landscape of your life? Does it deserve to cast a shadow over all the beautiful, complex terrain that came before it and all the uncharted territory that lies ahead? The answer is almost always a resounding no. This exercise isn't about diminishing your feelings. It's about providing them with their proper context, allowing you to feel them without being consumed by them. This practice naturally cultivates two essential Stoic qualities: humility and calm. Humility arises when you realize that your moment of embarrassment or frustration is not a unique cosmic tragedy, but a universal human experience repeated billions of times over throughout history. You are not the first person to be criticized, and you will not be the last. This isn't a depressing thought, it's a connecting one. It links you to the shared experience of being human, freeing you from the isolating belief that you are being uniquely targeted by fate. Calm follows humility because when you see the event in its true, small size, the frantic energy you are pouring into worrying about it suddenly has nowhere to go. The crisis evaporates because it was never a crisis to begin with. It was just a difficult moment, one of countless moments that make up a life. You can finally exhale. To integrate this layer into your daily life, there is one profoundly simple yet effective question you can ask yourself whenever criticism threatens to hijack your peace. Before you spiral into anger or self-doubt, pause and ask, will this criticism matter in a year? What about in 5 years? Be brutally honest with your answer. For the overwhelming majority of criticisms, we face the offhand remark from a coworker, the negative comment on a social media post, the disapproving look from a stranger. The answer is a definitive no. In a year, you will likely struggle to even remember the incident unless you consciously choose to cling to it. By answering this question, you perform a quick version of the view from above. You are fast-forwarding your timeline to get a preview of the event's true longevity, which is almost always shockingly short. This question acts as a circuit breaker for anxiety, instantly cutting the power to the catastrophic stories we tell ourselves and restoring a sense of realistic proportion. It allows you to acknowledge the feedback, decide if it contains any useful data for growth, and then release the overwhelming emotional charge, letting it fade into the past where it belongs, rather than carrying it as a heavy burden into your future. Throughout our history, certain individuals have embodied these Stoic principles to such a remarkable degree that they serve as powerful archetypes, living models of what it means to be truly immune to the shifting winds of external opinion. The Stoics themselves referred to this ideal as the sage, not a perfect, mythical being, but a person who has achieved a profound state of equanimity and virtue, remaining unshaken by either the seductive lure of praise or the piercing sting of blame. Their inner citadel is so well fortified that the noise of the outside world cannot penetrate their core peace. While absolute perfection in this endeavor is a goal we may never fully reach, like a star we navigate by rather than a port we ever actually arrive at, these figures provide a tangible, inspiring direction for our own journey. They show us what is possible for a human mind to achieve. Consider the example of Cato the Younger, a Roman senator whose unwavering commitment to his principles became the stuff of legend, even among his political enemies. In an era of rampant corruption and power grabs, Cato's integrity was his defining feature. He was openly criticized, mocked, and politically attacked for his stubborn adherence to the old Republican values. Yet he never wavered. His sense of justice and his personal code were not dependent on public approval. He understood that his duty was to act rightly, not to be celebrated for it. The historian Plutarch recounts that Cato's colleagues would often leave the Senate floor in frustration because they knew they could not bribe or flatter him into changing his stance. His resilience wasn't born of arrogance, but of a deep internal alignment. His self-worth was derived from his own virtuous actions, making the applause of the crowd or the hisses of his detractors equally irrelevant to his internal compass. He wasn't seeking to be seen as good. He was focused on being good, and the opinions of others simply could not alter that fundamental reality. Then there is Socrates, perhaps the most famous example of a man who chose truth and principle over his own life. Put on trial and sentenced to death on charges of corrupting the youth and impiety, essentially, for criticizing the state and making powerful people look foolish with his relentless questioning, Socrates had a clear path to escape. His friends had bribed the guards and devised a plan for him to flee Athens, but he refused. In his final dialogue, as recounted by Plato in Crito, Socrates argues that to run away would be to betray the very laws of Athens that had given him life and education. It would be an act of profound injustice, even if the verdict against him was itself unjust. He calmly accepted his sentence, drinking the hemlock without rancor or fear. demonstrating that his commitment to his philosophical principles was more important than his biological life, let alone his reputation. His equanimity in the face of death is the ultimate testament to a soul that has mastered the dichotomy of control. He could not control the jury's decision, but he could control his response to it, choosing to die with integrity rather than live in hypocrisy. These historical paragons are not meant to intimidate us with their seemingly superhuman resolve. Their value is not in making our own struggles with a critical comment seem petty by comparison. Rather, they serve as a North Star, guiding us toward a higher standard of inner fortitude. We are not meant to replicate their specific actions, but to learn from the underlying mindset that made those actions possible. Epictetus, who himself looked to these figures for inspiration, offered a simple, potent question to help us bridge the gap between their grandeur and our daily lives. He said, "If you wish to be good, first believe that you are bad." This is not a call for self-loathing, it is a radical call for honest self-assessment. It means having the humility to accept that we are works in progress, that we have flaws and blind spots, and that therefore, criticism might sometimes be a mirror held up to those very areas we need to improve. This belief system completely reframes criticism from a threat to an opportunity. So how do we translate the ideal of the Stoic sage into a practical tool for your next difficult encounter? It begins with a moment of conscious role-playing. The next time you feel that familiar heat of defensiveness or the cold chill of shame rising up after a critical remark, I want you to hit the pause button. In that sacred space between the event and your reaction, ask yourself one transformative question. What would my best self do in this moment? Your best self is your own personal sage, the most virtuous, courageous, and wise version of you that you are capable of becoming. This version of you is not reactive. This version of you does not crumble or lash out. This version of you is anchored, calm, and discerning. Your best self might choose to listen intently, seeking the kernel of useful truth without flinching at the harsh packaging. Your best self might respond with genuine curiosity, asking clarifying questions to fully understand the perspective being offered. Your best self might simply nod, thank the person for their feedback, and calmly exit the conversation to process it privately, refusing to be drawn into a heated debate. Or if the criticism is clearly malicious and without merit, your best self might offer a quiet, internal smile of pity for the critic's troubled state of mind, and then consciously release the words, allowing them to dissolve into the air like mist, leaving no trace on your inner world. By asking this question, you are not striving for an impossible perfection. You are simply inviting a wiser, more resilient part of your own consciousness to take the lead. You are choosing, in that moment, to build your citadel one brick at a time, moving steadily closer to the unshakable calm that defines a life lived with true Stoic immunity. Now we arrive at a point where all of our internal work meets the outside world, the art of response crafting. This sixth layer is about how we externally communicate our internal stability. It's the visible expression of all the layers you've built: the cognitive distance, the emotional citadel, the value assessment. A Stoic understands that their response is the one part of the entire exchange they have absolute control over, and they wield that power with intention. The goal is not to win an argument or to prove someone wrong. The goal is to communicate from a place of unshakable reason, preserving your own peace and integrity above all else. Your response becomes a demonstration of your philosophy in action, a quiet signal that you are not easily thrown off balance. The Stoics were masters of measured communication. Seneca, in his letters, spent considerable time discussing how to handle insults, which are perhaps the rawest, most unvarnished form of criticism. he offered two powerful, counterintuitive strategies that completely disarm an attacker. The first is to simply agree and amplify. If someone calls you arrogant, you might calmly reply, "You should have seen me when I was at my worst." This approach is not an admission of guilt, it's a refusal to play the game. By agreeing, you completely rob the insult of its intended power to shock or offend you. The attacker is left with nothing to push against. Their jab meets empty air, and they often just stumble into silence, confused by your lack of resistance. Seneca's second strategy is to respond with light, disarming wit. The key is that the wit must be free of malice or bitterness. It's a playful deflection, not a counterattack. This demonstrates that you have not been emotionally triggered and that you view the entire exchange with a sense of perspective and humor. The most powerful response of all, which Seneca also endorsed, is simple, dignified silence. To refuse to engage with a provocation is the ultimate display of strength. It says, "Your words are so insignificant to my inner state that they do not even warrant a reply." This silence is not passive or weak. It is a conscious, active choice to conserve your energy and protect your peace. Let's translate this ancient wisdom into a modern professional context, perhaps the most common arena for difficult criticism: email. Imagine you receive a message from a client or a colleague. The subject line is terse. The body of the email is blunt, publicly seeing your manager, and accuses you of dropping the ball on a project. The old reactive, you would feel that hot flush of anger and shame. The fingers would fly across the keyboard, crafting a defensive, detailed rebuttal point by point, perhaps with a slightly sarcastic tone, trying to prove your innocence and make the other person see how wrong they are. This almost always backfires, escalating the conflict and making you look emotionally reactive and unprofessional. The stoically layered you, however, handles this with a completely different protocol. Your first action is the most important. You do not hit reply. You might even draft the defensive email to get the anger out of your system, but you never send it. You close the application and walk away, allowing the initial emotional wave to pass. When you return with a clear head, you begin to craft your response using a simple, powerful template grounded in reason and detachment. Your response is not about your feelings, it's about facts and solutions. It might look something like this: "Thank you for bringing this to my attention. Name. I appreciate you flagging your concerns. I've reviewed the project timeline and can see how that miscommunication occurred on my end. To address this, I will specific, actionable step by specific time. I will keep you updated on the progress." Let's break down why this response is so effective. It starts with a disarming thank you, which immediately de-escalates tension. It acknowledges the feedback without accepting a personal indictment. It demonstrates that you've listened and taken it seriously. It then immediately pivots to a factual correction or clarification, stated neutrally, and finally, it focuses the energy forward on a solution. This response is clear, professional, and utterly detached from ego. It communicates that you are more interested in resolving the issue than in being right. And in doing so, you demonstrate a level of composure that often earns more respect than the project itself. The golden rule of Stoic communication is this: your response should be an act of choice, not a reaction. Before you speak or type, you have already run the situation through your internal layers. You have created cognitive distance to separate the facts from the story. You have retreated to your inner citadel to reaffirm your value. You have assessed what is within your control, your own words and actions. This process ensures that what comes out of your mouth is a reflection of your character, not a reflection of the critic's behavior. You are not a puppet whose strings are pulled by another person's opinion. You are the puppeteer, consciously choosing every movement. This transforms communication from a battlefield into a garden. You are no longer trying to defeat weeds, but are instead carefully cultivating the seeds of understanding, resolution, and your own unwavering peace. This brings us to one of the most transformative shifts in perspective that Stoicism offers, the idea that an obstacle is not a barrier, but the very path itself. The very criticism that feels like a blow intended to knock you down can be recast as the exact fuel you need to propel yourself forward. It's about taking the energy of the external event and channeling it inward to forge a stronger, more resilient self. Marcus Aurelius, in the private turmoil of his imperial duties, constantly returned to this mental alchemy. He didn't see the conspiracies, the betrayals, or the endless demands as mere hardships to be endured. He saw them as the raw materials for his own philosophical practice. He wrote in his journal, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." This is a complete reframing of reality. The critic, the detractor, the naysayer, they are not opponents to be defeated, but unwitting trainers in the gym of your character, providing the necessary resistance to make you stronger. Think about the specific virtues Marcus would have practiced in the face of criticism. When a senator publicly questioned his judgment, that was not an insult. It was an invitation to practice patience, to listen fully without immediately reacting in anger. When a junior officer made a mistake that reflected poorly on his leadership, that was a chance to practice humility, to recognize his own role in the oversight and to teach rather than punish. When a rival spread a vicious rumor about him, that was an opportunity to practice justice, to investigate the facts fairly without letting personal animosity cloud his judgment. Every single critique, no matter how petty or cruel, was a test. It was a pop quiz from the universe on how well he had internalized Stoic principles. Passing the test didn't mean winning the argument. It meant maintaining his inner equilibrium and responding from a place of virtue. The content of the criticism was almost irrelevant. Its true purpose was to serve as the whetstone against which he could sharpen his character. This is the ultimate reframing. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and you start asking, "What is this happening for?" Every piece of feedback, especially the negative kind, contains within it a hidden curriculum for your personal growth. It's pointing directly at a muscle you have the opportunity to develop. A critique of your work's thoroughness is a chance to cultivate the virtue of diligence. Feedback about your communication style is an invitation to practice clarity and temperance. Even an unfair, ad hominem attack is a profound test of your resolve and your ability to exercise justice by not repaying malice with malice. The criticism itself is neutral. Its value is determined entirely by what you choose to do with it. Let's make this practical with a creative example. Imagine you are a musician who has just released a new song into the world. You've poured your heart into it, and the initial feedback is a mixed bag. Alongside the praise are several comments pointing out that the lyrics in the second verse are cliché, and the mix is a bit muddy. The old, ego-driven response would be to dismiss the critics as not getting your art, to feel wounded, and to perhaps even pull the song down. The Stoic reframe, however, turns this entirely on its head. You see those negative comments not as attacks, but as a free, crowdsourced quality control report. Instead of crumbling, you get curious. You listen to the song again, specifically focusing on the second verse. Maybe they have a point. Maybe those lines are a little overused. You sit down with your notebook and challenge yourself to write 10 new, more original lines. Then you put on your best headphones and listen critically to the mix. Is the bass indeed overpowering the vocals? You open your editing software and make a few adjustments. the final product is now objectively better, stronger, and more resonant than it was before, all because you had the courage to use the criticism as fuel for refinement rather than as a reason to quit. The critics, though their delivery might have been harsh, have inadvertently become collaborators in your pursuit of excellence. This is why the most powerful question you can ask yourself in the wake of any criticism is not a defensive one, but a strategic one. How can this criticism serve your growth rather than hinder it? This single question acts as a mental pivot. It forces your brain to stop looking for threats and to start scanning for opportunities. It moves you from a passive victim mindset to an active, empowered agent of your own development. The answer might be that it serves your growth by highlighting a blind spot you need to work on. It might serve your growth by testing your emotional resilience and giving you a chance to practice non-reactivity. It might serve your growth by simply reminding you that your worth is not determined by the opinion of others, thereby strengthening your commitment to your inner citadel. In every possible case, the criticism is transformed from a problem to be solved into a tool to be used. It ceases to be an obstacle on your path and instead becomes the gravel that provides the traction you need to move forward with even greater determination and clarity. But this profound inner work, this building of an unassailable citadel, does not mean we must become isolated islands. Stoicism is not a philosophy of solitary self-reliance to the point of alienation. In fact, the seventh and perhaps most practical layer of immunity involves consciously and strategically building the right external environment to support your internal growth. The Stoics placed immense value on community, not just any community, but a circle of individuals committed to truth and virtue. They understood that while our ultimate peace must come from within, our journey toward it is profoundly aided by traveling with the right companions. Seneca, in his prolific letters to his friend Lucilius, dedicated significant thought to the nature of friendship and its critical role in a good life. He argued that a true friend is the greatest good, but he defined a true friend in a very specific way. It is not merely someone whose company we enjoy, but someone who acts as a guardian of our character. He wrote, "You should be asking yourself, is this person's criticism coming from a friend? For a friend will criticize openly and without malice accept such criticism, even when it is blunt, and be grateful for it." This is the gold standard, someone who tells you the hard truths not to hurt you, but because they care more about your growth than your immediate comfort. This concept is a powerful filter for your entire social and professional world. It asks you to evaluate the people around you not based on how often they agree with you or make you feel good in the moment, but on how they contribute to your long-term development. A Stoic-aligned support system isn't a group of yes men who offer constant, empty validation. That kind of environment actually makes you more fragile because your sense of worth becomes dependent on never hearing a contradictory word. Instead, a true support system is a network of people who have earned the right to speak into your life precisely because they have demonstrated both wisdom and good intent. They are the ones who can look at your work, your decisions, or your behavior and offer a perspective you might have missed. Their feedback isn't delivered with the goal of winning an argument or making themselves feel superior. It is offered as a gift with the clear intention of helping you see more clearly and become a better version of yourself. They are the prospectors who help you sift the mud, not the ones who throw more of it on you. In our modern context, this translates to being incredibly intentional about who you allow to influence you. It means actively seeking out mentors, people who are a few steps ahead of you on a path you admire, who have the experience to offer grounded, practical advice. It means finding or building communities, whether online or in person, that are focused on growth rather than gossip or complaint. These are spaces where the shared value is constructive feedback, where members challenge each other with respect and hold each other accountable to their stated goals. It's about curating your informational diet, choosing to listen to podcasts, read books, and follow thinkers who prioritize substance over sensationalism and who approach complex topics with nuance rather than dogma. This doesn't mean creating an echo chamber where everyone thinks exactly alike. Quite the opposite. It means creating a diverse council of thoughtful people who all share the common goal of pursuing truth, even if they arrive at it from different angles. The friction between well-intentioned, differing perspectives is where the deepest learning often occurs. This brings us to a profoundly important reflective question, one that can help you immediately identify and appreciate the most valuable people in your orbit. Take a moment and ask yourself, who in my life offers criticism that actually helps me improve? This isn't about who criticizes you the most, but who does it in a way that leaves you feeling clear-eyed and empowered rather than diminished and defensive. It might be a colleague who always finds the flaw in your proposal, but does it with such clear logic that you're grateful for the catch. It might be a partner who gently points out a pattern of behavior that's holding you back, not to shame you, but because they believe in your potential to change. It might be a coach or a mentor who doesn't sugarcoat their observations, but whose advice you trust implicitly because you know it comes from a place of wanting you to succeed. These people are your Stoic allies. They are the living, breathing embodiment of the constructive external feedback loop. Their voices are the ones you should amplify and seek out. By consciously recognizing and valuing these relationships, you actively strengthen your support system and make it easier to dismiss the noise from those who do not have your best interests at heart. You move from hoping for good feedback to proactively cultivating an environment that generates it, turning the world itself into a school for your character. Now we come to a profound and liberating Stoic truth that cuts directly against the grain of our modern world: the complete and total illusion of reputation. We spend an enormous amount of our mental energy, often without even realizing it, managing how we are perceived. We craft our online personas, we worry about what our colleagues think of us, we seek the approval of strangers and the validation of peers. The Stoics looked at this entire exhausting endeavor and saw it for what it is: a futile attempt to control the one thing that is fundamentally uncontrollable: the thoughts, opinions, and fleeting judgments of other people. Your reputation is not a solid, tangible thing you can build and hold onto. It is a wisp of smoke, a story told by others that changes with the wind, completely outside the jurisdiction of your will. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man of his era, was perhaps the most qualified to speak on the emptiness of public acclaim. He had access to the grandest stages, the loudest applause, the most enduring monuments. And yet, in the quiet of his own mind, he constantly reminded himself of its utter meaninglessness. He wrote, "So remember this principle when something threatens to cause you pain. The thing itself was no misfortune at all. To endure it and prevail is great good fortune." But he went even further on the topic of reputation, delivering one of the most sobering and perspective-shifting observations in all of his meditations. He would contemplate how quickly even the most celebrated figures are forgotten. In a moment, he wrote, "All is forgotten," and look at the chaos of oblivion and the gulf of endless time and the emptiness of all that applause. He would think of entire civilizations that had risen and fallen, their heroes and villains alike turned to dust and their stories lost. From the vantage point of eternity, your 5-star review, your promotion announcement, or the nasty comment on your post are all equally insignificant. They are whispers in a hurricane, gone almost the instant they are made. This craving for a good reputation, this deep-seated need to be well thought of, is the very trap that sets us up for immense suffering when criticism inevitably arrives. When you tie your sense of self-worth to your online ratings, your professional title, or the number of people who applaud you, you are building your house on a foundation of quicksand. You have handed the remote control for your happiness and self-esteem to everyone except yourself. The moment the praise stops or turns to criticism, the entire structure of your identity feels like it's collapsing because it was built on an external, unstable source. The Stoic goal is to move the source of your validation from that shaky external ground to the solid, internal ground of your own character and actions. Your worth is not determined by your reputation, it is determined by your virtue. There is no clearer modern example of this painful dynamic than the world of the social media influencer. Imagine a person who has built a career, an income, and an entire identity on the foundation of public approval. Their livelihood is literally measured in likes, shares, and positive comments. They post a carefully crafted piece of content they are proud of, and for a few hours the algorithm blesses them. The praise rolls in. They feel validated, successful, and seen. Then the tide turns. Maybe they make a minor misstep or simply post on a day when the internet is in a foul mood. The hate comments arrive, not just criticism of the content, but vicious, personal attacks on their intelligence, their appearance, their character. For someone whose entire psychological framework is built on that positive feedback, this isn't just a bad day at the office, it is an existential crisis. Their sense of self is directly under assault because they have mistakenly equated their external reputation with their internal value. The suffering is intense and very real, a perfect, painful illustration of the Stoic warning. So how do we untangle ourselves from this web? How do we cultivate a self-worth that is truly independent of the fickle opinions of others? The practice begins with a conscious and often difficult process of introspection. You must actively work to decouple your actions from your need for a specific outcome. You learn to derive satisfaction from the integrity of the effort itself, from knowing you did your best, acted with good intentions, and stayed true to your principles. The final product and the public's reaction to it is then released. It becomes data, not a verdict. This is what it means to do the work for its own sake. The carpenter who takes pride in the perfect joint, even if it will be hidden inside a wall. The writer who feels the piece is complete and truthful, regardless of whether it goes viral or is completely ignored. The parent who knows they acted with patience and love, even if their child is too young to verbalize appreciation. The reward is in the virtuous action, not in the external recognition that may or may not follow. This leads to a powerful, almost unsettling reflective question, one designed to strip away all the noise and help you discover what you truly value. I want you to seriously contemplate this. What would you do if you knew for a fact that no one would ever praise or criticize you again? If all external feedback suddenly vanished from your life, what work would you still show up for? What activities would you pursue simply for the deep, intrinsic satisfaction they bring you? What kind of person would you choose to be when no one is watching and no one is keeping score? Your honest answer to this question points directly to your core values, to the unshakable foundation of your character that exists beneath the layers of people-pleasing and reputation management. It reveals the projects, relationships, and principles that are truly yours, independent of the applause or the boos of the crowd. Aligning your life with these answers is the ultimate act of Stoic freedom, building a self-worth so resilient that it renders both praise and criticism powerless to alter your essential peace. The eighth layer of immunity brings us to one of the most personal and transformative Stoic practices, the daily habit of journaling. This isn't about keeping a diary of your feelings or simply venting onto the page. This is a structured, objective process of self-examination, a way to take the chaotic storm of an emotional reaction and distill it into clear, rational insights. Think of your journal as a private laboratory where you can safely dissect criticism under the calm light of reason, separating the useful data from the emotional noise. The most famous example of this in action is Marcus Aurelius himself. His masterpiece, Meditations, was never intended for publication. It was his personal journal, a series of notes and reminders he wrote to himself to reinforce his philosophical principles amidst the immense pressures of leading an empire. He wasn't writing to be profound. He was writing to stay grounded, to process the daily slings and arrows, and to return to his core virtues again and again. This practice is powerful because it forces a pause and creates a tangible record of your mental patterns. In the heat of the moment when criticism lands, your thoughts are a tangled, reactive mess. But when you sit down to write, you are forced to slow that process down and translate those chaotic impulses into coherent sentences. This act of translation is itself a form of cognitive distancing. The simple framework to follow is to break your entry into 3 distinct parts, creating a narrative arc from reaction to wisdom. Start by stating the facts with brutal objectivity. They said X. Write down the criticism as it was delivered, verbatim if possible, without any editorializing or emotional charge. This pins down the event itself, preventing your memory from exaggerating or distorting it later. The second part is where you grant yourself honesty without judgment. I felt why. Here, you give a name to the raw, unfiltered emotional response. Did you feel a hot surge of anger, a cold plunge of shame, a defensive bristling of your ego, a deep, sinking feeling of inadequacy? Write it all down. Acknowledging these feelings on paper is like draining the poison from a wound. It robs them of their power to control you subconsciously. It's not about wallowing in the emotion, but about observing it with curiosity, as if you were a scientist taking notes on a fascinating specimen. This step validates your humanity while simultaneously containing the emotional spill so it doesn't seep into the rest of your day. The third and most crucial part is the Stoic reassessment, but the Stoic response is Z. This is where you apply everything we've discussed. You consult your inner citadel and your defined virtues. You run the criticism through the dichotomy of control. You consider the critic's potential context and motives. You look for any kernel of useful truth, and then you write down the calm, reasoned, empowered perspective you aspire to hold. For example, your complete entry might read, "They said my presentation was disorganized and unconvincing. I felt defensive, embarrassed, and angry that they didn't see the hours of work I put in." But the Stoic response is to separate their tone from the content. The disorganized part is useful feedback I can use to improve my structure for next time. The unconvincing part is their subjective opinion, influenced by their own biases. My value is not determined by this single presentation, but by my consistent effort and my willingness to learn from this. The magic happens in the consistency. Making this a non-negotiable daily habit, even for just 5 minutes, does something remarkable to your brain over time. It builds a neural pathway between the trigger of criticism and the response of rational assessment, making that calm, discerning state your default setting rather than a hard-won battle. It transforms your journal from a simple notebook into a training ground for resilience, a place where you actively rehearse the person you want to become. When you look back through its pages weeks or months later, you don't just see a record of bad days, you see tangible evidence of your own growth, a map showing how you've learned to navigate choppy waters with increasing skill and grace. And so we arrive at a final, crucial piece of the Stoic immunity puzzle, one that might seem counterintuitive at first, but is perhaps the most empowering of all: the concept of humility as armor. We often think of armor as something hard, impenetrable, and proud, a shell that deflects attacks, but Stoic humility is a different kind of protection altogether. It's not a rigid wall. It's a flexible, absorbent material that accepts the impact of criticism and uses its energy to make you stronger rather than letting it shatter you. This isn't about self-deprecation or thinking poorly of yourself. True Stoic humility is a clear-eyed, honest recognition of your own fallibility. It's the simple, grounding acceptance that you are an imperfect human being, a work in progress, and that you do not have a monopoly on truth or perfection. This honest admission is the very thing that disarms criticism before it can even land a blow. The Stoic teacher Epictetus, born into slavery and well acquainted with life's hardships, placed this idea at the very foundation of wisdom. He famously said that the beginning of philosophy is the awareness of one's own weakness and need. He argued that the person who believes they have all the answers has, in fact, closed the door to all learning. He said, "It is impossible for a person to begin to learn what he thinks he already knows." Think about the profound truth in that. If you walk into a room convinced of your own infallibility, every piece of feedback that contradicts your view will feel like a personal attack. Your ego will rise up to defend its territory, but if you walk into that same room with a quiet humility, with a conscious understanding that your perspective is limited and your knowledge is incomplete, then that same feedback is no longer an attack. It becomes a potential gift, a piece of a puzzle you didn't even know you were missing. It transforms from a threat into an opportunity. This is why Epictetus saw the admission of ignorance not as a moment of shame, but as the first and most courageous step toward genuine growth and strength. In our modern world, we often mistake this kind of openness for weakness, especially in leadership. We have this outdated archetype of the leader as the unwavering, all-knowing commander who barks orders and never admits a flaw. But that model is incredibly fragile. A leader who cannot accept feedback is a leader who is doomed to make catastrophic errors, isolated from the reality on the ground by their own towering ego. Now imagine a different kind of leader. She has just proposed a new strategy to her team. A junior member of the team who has been quietly analyzing the data respectfully raises a hand and points out a significant flaw in the plan that she had completely overlooked. The fragile leader would see this as a challenge to their authority. They might dismiss the concern, double down on their original idea, and create an environment where no one feels safe to speak up again. The humble leader, the Stoic leader, does the opposite. They lean in, they get curious, they thank the team member for their keen observation and openly admit, "You know what, you are absolutely right. I missed that, thank you for catching it, let's work together to adjust the plan." In that moment, what has the leader lost? A tiny, fleeting bit of pride. But what have they gained? They've gained a better strategy. They've gained the immense respect and loyalty of their team by demonstrating that the mission is more important than their ego. And they've fostered a culture of psychological safety where everyone feels empowered to contribute their best thinking. That is not weakness, that is immense, unshakable strength. Their humility has become their greatest asset, protecting the project from failure and protecting their leadership from the rot of arrogance. This is how we must reframe humility, not as cowering or thinking less of yourself, but as thinking of yourself less often. It's about shifting your focus from protecting your self-image to pursuing a better outcome. It is the ultimate form of empowerment because it frees you from the exhausting prison of having to be right all the time. When you embrace the fact that you are a student of life, always learning, always evolving, then every interaction becomes a potential classroom. The person offering criticism, regardless of their tone or intent, becomes a potential teacher. Some teachers are kind and gentle, others are harsh and unskilled. But a humble student can learn from both. The lesson might be a piece of factual information about how to do your job better, or it might be a lesson in patience, in compassion, or in maintaining your own peace when faced with another person's turmoil. There is always something to be gleaned. This brings us to a powerful, mindset-shifting question you can carry with you, a lens through which to view every single piece of feedback that comes your way, from the constructive to the cruel. Instead of bracing for impact, ask yourself, what if this critique, buried beneath all the noise and emotion, holds a single kernel of truth that I can learn from? This question is a deliberate act of intellectual humility. It doesn't mean you have to accept the entire criticism as valid. It doesn't mean you have to agree with the person's delivery or their motives. It simply means you are making a choice to actively look for the potential signal in the noise. You are choosing to be a prospector sifting for gold rather than a victim covered in mud. Perhaps that kernel of truth is about a careless mistake you actually did make. Perhaps it's about a blind spot in your communication style you were unaware of. Perhaps the kernel is simply the truth that this person is deeply unhappy and is projecting their pain onto you, which is a valuable piece of data about your relationship with them. By asking this question, you seize control of the narrative. You are no longer on the receiving end of an evaluation. You are on a personal mining expedition for self-improvement. This stance makes you immune to the sting because you've changed the entire goal of the interaction from defending your ego to strengthening your character. And that is a game you can always win. Think of your mind and body not as two separate entities, but as a single, interconnected system, constantly influencing one another in a profound feedback loop. Your physical state doesn't just host your thoughts, it actively shapes them. When you're exhausted, malnourished, or stagnant, your mental resilience is the first thing to crumble, leaving you wide open to the emotional impact of even the slightest criticism. The ancient Stoics weren't just armchair philosophers, they were adamant proponents of this holistic view. The teacher Musonius Rufus, whose lectures were attended by a young Epictetus, was particularly vocal on this point. He argued relentlessly that philosophy was not merely about abstract reasoning, but about the daily practice of living virtuously, which absolutely included caring for the physical vessel. He famously stated, "How could someone incapable of standing physical exertion be capable of courage? How could a person worn out by pleasures be capable of self-control?" For Rufus, neglecting the body was a philosophical failure because a weak body creates a weak mind, and a weak mind cannot possibly practice the virtues of courage, justice, wisdom, and temperance when under pressure. This is the essence of the 9th layer of Stoic immunity, building a foundation of physical and mental discipline that acts as a permanent buffer against life's inevitable shocks. It's about creating a baseline of equanimity so stable that when criticism hits, your entire system doesn't go into a tailspin. You've already done the work to steady the ship in calm waters, so when the storm arrives, you're not scrambling, you're simply adjusting your balance. This isn't about achieving a chiseled physique or being able to meditate for hours on end. It's about the cumulative, compounding effect of small, consistent practices that train your nervous system to default to a state of calm readiness rather than reactive panic. A body that is regularly moved and challenged learns to process stress hormones more efficiently. A mind that is routinely given moments of silence learns to observe thoughts without immediately being hijacked by them. Together, they create a reservoir of strength you can draw from when you need it most. Consider the powerful effect of a simple, consistent morning routine. It doesn't have to be complex or start at 4 in the morning. It could be 20 minutes of stretching, 10 minutes of writing in a journal to clarify your intentions for the day, and 5 minutes of sitting in silence, focusing only on your breath. This isn't just about productivity, it's a daily rehearsal of self-mastery. You are starting your day by making conscious choices, by imposing a small amount of beneficial order on the chaos of the world. You are telling your nervous system through action that you are in command. Then, when you arrive at work and your inbox contains a sharply worded email, the impact is lessened. The discipline of your morning has already fortified you. The criticism doesn't land on raw, exposed nerve endings. It lands on a mind and body that have already been centered and grounded. The emotional shock is absorbed by the resilience you've been systematically building, allowing you to access your cognitive tools, the distance, the assessment, the perspective with far greater ease. The goal of this physical and mental training is not to avoid feeling anything, but to create what we might call response flexibility. It's the crucial gap, the space to choose. A body buzzing with unused energy and a mind cluttered with anxious thoughts have almost no flexibility. Their only response is a knee-jerk reaction. A body that is healthily tired from movement and a mind that has been practiced in focus have immense flexibility. They can receive a stimulus, process it, and then choose the most virtuous and effective response. This is the true connection Musonius Rufus was pointing to. The discipline of pushing through one more mile on a run when you want to quit directly trains the mental muscle required to listen calmly to unfair feedback when you want to lash out. The discipline of holding a difficult yoga pose and focusing on your breath directly trains the mental muscle required to hold your emotional center during a tense conversation. Each act of physical discipline is a down payment on future mental fortitude, so I want to leave you with a final, practical question to turn this concept inward. Look at your own life and ask yourself with honest curiosity, what daily habits currently fortify your mental peace against external noise, and what habits might be undermining it? This isn't about judgment or launching a drastic overhaul. It's about awareness. Does scrolling through social media first thing in the morning leave your mind feeling cluttered and reactive? Or does a short walk outside leave it feeling clear and calm? Does skipping a meal make you irritable and thin-skinned, while eating a nutritious one provides a steadier emotional baseline? Does that extra hour of late-night television leave you foggy and vulnerable the next day, while an earlier bedtime makes you more resilient? Your mission is to become a scientist of your own well-being, experimenting to discover the simple, sustainable practices, whether it's a daily walk, a mindfulness app, lifting weights, or simply drinking more water, that build your unique inner citadel from the ground up, making you naturally more immune to the chaos and criticism of the outside world. Now we arrive at a crucial and immediately actionable practice, one that transforms Stoic theory into tangible, life-changing habit, the Stoic pause. This is the art of ritualizing your response time, of building a sacred space between the spark of criticism and the flame of your reaction. The philosopher Seneca, who served as an advisor to the chaotic Emperor Nero, understood the destructive power of an unchecked impulse better than most. He witnessed firsthand how a single moment of rash anger could unravel years of work and diplomacy. In his writings, he offered what might be the single most valuable piece of practical advice for handling provocation: delay. He wrote, "The greatest remedy for anger is delay. Ask for this first concession from your anger, that it not demand revenge immediately. It will not be so hot later." His insight was profoundly biological. He understood that the initial surge of emotion is a chemical firestorm in the brain. a temporary madness that clouds judgment. His solution wasn't to fight the feeling, but to outlast it through the simple, powerful act of waiting. A ritualized pause is the physical embodiment of this wisdom. It's a deliberate, repeatable action you perform to signal to your entire nervous system that it is time to stand down and let reason take the wheel. It's not about suppressing the emotion. It's about creating a container for it, a designated period where the emotion can exist without being allowed to dictate your behavior. Think of it like this: when a small child is having a tantrum, the worst thing you can do is immediately give in to their demands. That only teaches them that tantrums work. The best thing you can do is to calmly hold the space, to let the storm of their emotion rage while you remain an unmoved, steady presence, and then address the issue once they have calmed down. Your own emotional brain is that child. The critical comment is the trigger for the tantrum. The ritualized pause is you, the adult, choosing to hold the space until the storm passes. Let's make this incredibly practical with a scenario everyone can relate to. You're in a team meeting, and you've just finished presenting a proposal you spent weeks developing. A colleague, perhaps someone with a competitive streak, leans forward and says in front of everyone, "I'm sorry, but this entire approach seems fundamentally flawed." It's not grounded in our actual market data. The emotional hijack is instantaneous. Your face flushes, your heart starts to pound, every muscle in your body tenses for a fight. The words to a sharp, defensive retort are already on your tongue, poised to launch a counterattack that will almost certainly escalate the conflict and make you look reactive and unprofessional. This is the precise moment to deploy your pre-planned ritual. Your ritual could be as simple as taking a long, slow sip of water from the glass in front of you. The physical act of reaching for the glass, the sensation of the cool water, the deliberate swallowing, this simple series of actions forces a physical pause of just 5 to 10 seconds. In that time, you are not formulating your reply, you are just drinking water. You are giving your rational cortex those precious few seconds it needs to come back online. Another powerful ritual is to pick up your pen and write down the criticism verbatim on your notepad. This action shifts your focus from the person to the words themselves, objectifying the feedback and giving you a task to perform. You are no longer a victim under attack, you are a secretary taking notes. Or if you're on a video call, your ritual could be to simply mute your microphone for a moment and take 3 deep, silent breaths. The act of reaching for the mute button is the physical trigger that says, "I am now entering my pause." The neurological magic of this practice is that it literally creates new pathways in your brain. It builds a bridge between the amygdala's alarm signal and the prefrontal cortex's executive function. With enough repetition, the ritual itself begins to trigger a calmer state. The simple act of reaching for your water glass will start to send a signal to your body that says, "Stand down, we are handling this with reason now." This space is where your freedom truly lies. It's in those few seconds of silence that you can access all the other layers we've built. You can separate the fact of their words from your catastrophic story. You can assess their potential motives. You can consult your inner citadel. And then, and only then, can you choose a response that aligns with your values, rather than spilling out a reaction that is dictated by your panic. So I want you to think about this with genuine practicality. Don't just agree that a pause is a good idea. Decide right now what your pause will be. What is a simple, inconspicuous, and repeatable action you can ritualize? It must be something you can do anywhere, anytime, without drawing undue attention to yourself. It could be the water sip, the note-taking, the deep breath. or even just the conscious act of placing both feet flat on the floor and feeling the ground beneath you for a 3 count. The specific action matters less than your commitment to making it your non-negotiable first move. What simple physical anchor could you insert between the criticism you hear and the response you give to ensure that your answer is always a product of your character, not a prisoner of your momentary emotion? And so we reach the summit of our journey, the ultimate layer of Stoic immunity that reframes our entire relationship with reality itself. This is the practice of Amor Fati, a Latin phrase meaning a love of one's fate. While famously associated with the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, its heart beats with a profoundly Stoic rhythm. It is the radical, unconditional acceptance of everything that happens to you, not with passive resignation, but with an active, embracing love. It is the decision to not merely tolerate criticism and hardship, but to welcome them as necessary, even cherished, threads in the tapestry of your life. This is not about pretending that pain doesn't hurt. It is about recognizing that the pain itself is the very material required for your transformation, the chisel that sculpts the statue. The Stoic foundation for this is found in the teachings of Epictetus, who framed our existence within a vast, interconnected cosmic order. He taught his students to see every single event, without exception, as an integral and necessary part of the whole. He argued that to resent an event is to rebel against the nature of the universe itself, a futile and exhausting struggle. In his discourses, he uses a powerful metaphor, asking us to imagine ourselves as a foot. If the foot had a consciousness, it might complain when it is covered in mud and forced into a shoe, but it should understand that it was made for the whole body, and getting dirty is an essential part of its purpose in serving that greater whole. In the same way, he says you are a part of the universe. The events of your life, including every piece of criticism, are not random attacks. They are part of the necessary functioning of the whole. To complain is to forget your place and your purpose within this magnificent, interconnected system. This mindset performs a breathtaking alchemy on our experience. It transforms the leaden weight of resentment into the gold of acceptance. Resentment is a backward-looking energy, a constant, draining refighting of a battle that has already happened. It keeps you chained to the past, endlessly replaying the hurt and wishing things were different. Acceptance, and especially the active embrace of Amor Fati, is a forward-moving energy. It allows you to take the event exactly as it is, without the exhausting filter of "this shouldn't have happened," and immediately begin the work of integrating it into your story and using it for growth. The criticism is no longer a foreign invader to be expelled. It is a native part of your landscape to be understood and cultivated. Consider the profound shift in a practical scenario. You receive a performance review that is far harsher than you anticipated. It points out several significant weaknesses you were completely blind to. The path of resentment is well worn. You spend days fuming, complaining to friends about your unfair boss, drafting angry emails in your head, and questioning your entire career path. You are stuck. Now apply Amor Fati. You take a deep breath and consciously choose to love this fate. You say to yourself, "This is exactly what I needed." This is the universe, in the form of my manager, delivering a brutally honest mirror to me because it wants me to grow. It is gifting me with a clear, undeniable map of my blind spots. This reframe doesn't magically erase the sting, but it completely changes what you do with that energy. Instead of using it to fuel a cycle of complaint, you use it to fuel a project of improvement. You dive into the feedback, you create a plan to address each weakness, you seek out training, you ask for mentorship. The harsh review ceases to be a catastrophe and becomes the catalyst for your most significant professional leap forward. You don't just get over it, you become grateful for it. This is the final, master-level prompt for your own reflection, a question that can unlock a deeper level of peace and power in any situation. The next time criticism lands and you feel that familiar resistance rising up, pause and ask yourself with genuine curiosity, can you find a way to be grateful for this criticism, however painful? This is not a call for false positivity or for pretending the delivery was kind when it was cruel. It is an invitation to look past the wrapping paper and ask if the content itself, however poorly presented, contains a gift. Can you be grateful for the clarity it provides, even if that clarity is uncomfortable? Can you be grateful for the motivation it ignites to prove yourself wrong? Can you be grateful for the test it presents to your Stoic practice, giving you a chance to strengthen your resilience? Can you be grateful for the simple reminder that you are still learning, still growing, and still very much alive on your journey? Finding that single thread of gratitude, however thin, allows you to begin weaving the experience into the fabric of your life rather than treating it as a stain you can never remove. It is the practice of loving your fate, not because it is always pleasant, but because it is uniquely and irrevocably yours, and it holds the raw materials for building the person you are destined to become. Imagine if you could meet a harsh critique not with a wall of defensiveness, but with a smile that completely neutralizes its sting. This isn't about mocking the other person or retreating into denial. It's about wielding a disarming and profoundly Stoic tool, light-hearted humor. The great Roman Stoic Seneca, who wrote extensively on managing anger, was a powerful advocate for this approach. He observed that a well-timed, gentle jest could often diffuse a tense situation far more effectively than a heated counter-argument. He saw wit not as a weapon for retaliation, but as a shield for protection. When you respond to negativity with playful humor, you accomplish something remarkable. You acknowledge the comment without accepting its emotional payload. You create an invisible barrier that says, "I hear you, but I refuse to let your words dictate my inner state." Laughter, in this context, becomes an act of spiritual hygiene, a way to disinfect a moment of potential poison without needing to engage in a messy, draining battle. The magic of this technique lies in its ability to reframe the entire interaction. A critical comment, especially a nitpicky or petty one, is often an attempt to provoke a certain reaction, to see you get flustered, angry, or defensive. It's a form of emotional bait. Humor allows you to swerve around that bait entirely. Picture this. You've just given a presentation, and a colleague raises their hand to point out, with a rather smug tone, a single typo on your 45th slide. The old, ego-driven response might be to get flustered, make an excuse, or fire back a comment about their own imperfect record. The Stoic response, infused with lightheartedness, looks completely different. You might smile warmly and say, "You've discovered my secret plot to keep everyone on their toes. I'm glad someone is paying such close attention to the details. I'll get that corrected right away." This does several things at once. It validates their observation without groveling, it demonstrates unshakable composure, and it completely robs their criticism of its intended power to embarrass you. The tension in the room evaporates, replaced by a few chuckles, and you've maintained complete control of your emotional landscape. However, this powerful tool must be wielded with precision and, above all, virtue. Seneca's advice for wit came with a crucial caveat. It must never descend into cruel sarcasm or personal mockery. The goal is to disarm the situation, not to destroy the other person. Sarcasm that bites and wounds is simply anger in a clever disguise. It escalates conflict and betrays your own inner turmoil. True Stoic humor is gentle, often self-deprecating, and always delivered with a spirit of goodwill rather than malice. It pokes fun at the situation itself, not at the character of the critic. The difference is everything. A sarcastic retort like, "Well, I'm glad you finally found something useful to contribute," is designed to inflict damage and will only breed resentment. A light-hearted reply like, "I guess my keyboard decided to go on a little adventure without me," addresses the same minor error but does so in a way that is completely non-threatening and inclusive. It protects your peace without sacrificing your integrity or your commitment to justice and kindness. At its core, this use of humor is a masterclass in maintaining emotional distance. It is the behavioral embodiment of the cognitive separation we've practiced. By choosing to respond with a joke, you are actively demonstrating that you have not internalized the criticism. You are showing through your actions that the comment exists outside the walls of your inner citadel. You are treating it as an external event, a piece of data to be playfully acknowledged and then filed away or acted upon from a place of calm choice. This approach is incredibly effective because it is so unexpected. Most people are primed for either a fight or a flight response. Humor introduces a third, disarming option: effortless composure. It signals to everyone, including yourself, that your self-worth is so secure that a few critical words cannot shake it. So the next time you feel the hot flush of embarrassment or anger begin to rise from a sharp comment, pause and ask yourself this powerful question: how might a touch of gentle, disarming humor protect my peace in this moment without escalating the conflict into something worse? The answer might just be the key to unlocking a more resilient and decidedly more joyful way of moving through the world. Now we come to a layer that might feel counterintuitive at first, but is perhaps the most liberating of them all: the practice of forgiveness. This is not about condoning harsh or unfair behavior, nor is it about suddenly becoming best friends with someone who has hurt you. Stoic forgiveness is a purely internal act, a strategic release of the resentment you are carrying for your own peace of mind. It is the final piece of emotional alchemy, where you transform the poison of another person's words into a source of your own inner freedom. Holding onto anger over criticism is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to get sick. You are the only one who suffers from the bitterness you hold onto long after the critic has moved on with their day. Marcus Aurelius offers one of the most profound and practical frameworks for understanding this. He constantly reminded himself that people who act wrongly, who lash out with harsh criticism or cruelty, do so from a place of ignorance about what is truly good. He wrote in his private journal, "When people injure you, ask yourself what good or harm they thought would come of it. If you understand that, you'll feel sympathy rather than outrage or anger. You see the ignorance behind the action, and you can choose to show them a better way or simply to pity their error." This is a radical reframe. The critic is not an evil villain consciously trying to destroy you. They are a confused human being, lost in their own misperceptions about what brings true value and happiness. They believe that putting you down will elevate them, or that venting their frustration will ease their own pain. They are simply mistaken. Seeing their actions as a form of blindness rather than pure malice allows you to replace your anger with a sense of pity or even compassion for their flawed state of mind. This perspective is incredibly empowering because it moves the locus of control firmly back to you. You cannot control their ignorance, but you can absolutely control your judgment of it. You can choose to see their criticism not as a personal attack, but as a symptom of their own internal struggle. Perhaps the colleague who eviscerated your idea in a meeting is drowning in insecurity about their own job performance. Maybe the family member who constantly nitpicks your life choices is projecting their own deep regrets onto you. Their words are a window into their pain, not a mirror reflecting your worth. When you truly internalize this, the criticism loses its personal sting. It becomes a sad commentary on their state of being, not yours. Forgiving them, then, is an act of supreme self-interest. It is the decision to stop allowing their internal turmoil to dictate your internal weather. So what does this internal act of stoic forgiveness look like in practice? It begins with a simple, silent mental exercise. Think of someone whose criticism has recently gotten under your skin. Now, in the privacy of your own mind, consciously wish them well. You might say to yourself, even though your words were hurtful, I genuinely hope you find the peace and clarity you are clearly lacking. This isn't about sending them positive vibes in the hope that they change. It's about reprogramming your own neural pathways. By actively generating a thought of goodwill towards them, you are severing the mental link between their image and your feelings of resentment. You are reclaiming the emotional territory they have been occupying rent-free in your head. You are not doing it for them, you are doing it for you, to cleanse your own mental space and restore your own equilibrium. This practice is the ultimate application of the dichotomy of control. Their past action of criticizing you is an external event, firmly in the category of things you cannot change. Your present and future resentment, however, is an internal judgment, and that is 100% within your power to release. Holding onto it is a choice, and it is a choice that only harms you. Forgiveness is simply the choice to drop that heavy, useless burden you've been carrying around. It's the decision to finally set down the hot coal you've been holding, waiting for the other person to feel the burn. So I want to leave you with a final, powerful question to ask yourself the next time you feel the old familiar resentment starting to bubble up. Look inward and ask with genuine curiosity, what heavy burden could you choose to drop right now, simply by deciding to forgive this critic and reclaim your peace? And sometimes the most powerful response you can possibly muster is no response at all. In a world that constantly demands our reaction, our hot take, our immediate engagement, the Stoics recognized a profound strength in the deliberate, strategic use of silence. The philosopher Epictetus, who knew a great deal about enduring the foolishness of others, offered some of the clearest guidance on this. He said, "If you are told that such a one speaks ill of you, make no defense against what is said, but answer, he was ignorant of my other faults, else he would not have mentioned these alone." This is a masterclass in deflection, but it's the second part. His teaching that cuts even deeper. He advised that when you encounter someone who is clearly speaking from a place of ignorance or malice, the wisest course of action is often to simply remain silent. Why? Because to engage with foolishness on its own terms is to descend to its level. You cannot win a game that was designed for you to lose. Your silence in this context is not a white flag of surrender. It is a drawbridge you deliberately raise to protect the sanctity of your inner citadel from an invading force that is not worth your time or energy. This Stoic principle translates with stunning clarity to our modern digital landscape, particularly when dealing with the phenomenon of online trolls and hate comments. These are not critics offering flawed but potentially useful feedback. They are emotional arsonists whose sole intent is to provoke a reaction and watch you burn. They operate on a simple, predatory economy. They invest a tiny amount of energy into a venomous comment, hoping to withdraw a massive payout of your anger, your distress, or your public engagement. When you respond, even with a well-reasoned rebuttal, you are paying that troll their desired wage. You are validating their method and encouraging further attacks. But when you choose silence, when you simply scroll past, delete, or block without a single word of acknowledgement, you completely break their business model. You starve the beast. Your non-response communicates a powerful, unspoken message. Your words have no value here. You are not even worth the calories it would take my fingers to type a reply. This is the ultimate demonstration of the dichotomy of control. You cannot control their decision to post something vile, but you have absolute control over your decision to not let it occupy a single second of your mental real estate. It is crucial to understand that this stoic silence is an active, conscious choice, not a passive act of defeat. There is a world of difference between biting your tongue because you feel powerless and consciously choosing to withhold your energy because you recognize the interaction as worthless. One comes from a place of weakness, the other from a position of immense strength and discernment. It is the difference between a small, quiet dog that is trembling in the corner and a large, calm lion that sees a yapping hyena and simply decides to ignore it, not out of fear, but out of a profound understanding of its own power and the insignificance of the distraction. Your silence, when chosen from this place of strength, is deafening. It is a statement of your own unshakable value. You are effectively saying, "My peace, my focus, and my time are far too precious to waste on this." You are not running away from a conflict. You are walking away from a trash fire, recognizing that getting closer will only leave you smelling of smoke. So the vital question to ask yourself, the filter through which to run every piece of provocation, is this: when might your greatest power actually lie in saying nothing? The answer becomes clear when you apply the stoic filters we've already built. Is the person speaking with both wisdom and good intent? If not, silence is likely your shield. Is the criticism about something within your control, or is it just meaningless noise about an external? If it's the latter, silence is your tool for conservation of energy. Does engaging in this argument serve your growth or your virtue, or does it merely serve your ego's desire to be right? If it's for the ego, silence is the path to humility. By consciously choosing your moments of silence, you reclaim an enormous amount of personal agency. You are no longer a puppet whose strings are jerked by every critic and troll. You are the puppeteer, deciding which performances are worthy of your participation and which are not. In the echoing quiet of your non-response, you affirm the most powerful truth of all, that your worth is self-contained, and no amount of external noise can ever diminish it unless you grant it permission to be heard. Building this profound level of immunity isn't a one-time event. It's a continuous process of reinforcement, a daily rehearsal of truth until it becomes your automatic default setting. This is the 12th layer, the practice of continuous self-reminder, and it's what bridges the gap between understanding these principles in moments of calm and actually accessing them in the heat of a stressful encounter. You can't expect to build a resilient mindset by simply reading about stoicism and then hoping it magically appears when your boss is yelling. Resilience, like any skill, must be practiced until it becomes second nature, a deeply ingrained habit of thought that you can call upon without conscious effort. It's the difference between a musician who has to think about every note and one who feels the music flow through them instinctively. Your goal is to make stoic wisdom your instinct. We find the perfect model for this in the very source of so much stoic wisdom, the Emperor Marcus Aurelius. His personal journal, which we now call Meditations, is arguably the greatest example of continuous self-reminder in history. He wasn't writing for an audience, he was having a conversation with himself, repeating the core truths of his philosophy over and over again to fortify his mind against the immense pressures of his role. He would write entries like, "Begin each day by telling yourself, 'Today I shall be meeting with interference, ingratitude, insolence, disloyalty, ill will, and selfishness.'" This wasn't pessimism, it was premeditation. It was his way of rehearsing his response to adversity before it ever arrived, of inoculating his mind against the shock of the unexpected. He was layering his consciousness with truth, sentence by sentence, day after day, so that when trouble did come, he was prepared. His journal was his daily drill, his mental gym where he strengthened the muscles of his character. This is the crucial distinction that makes all the difference. Stoic layering requires active practice, not passive theory. It's not enough to intellectually agree that you control your judgments. You have to actively fire that neural pathway until it becomes the deepest, most well-worn trail in your brain. One of the most effective ways to do this is through the use of short, potent mantras or phrases that encapsulate a core Stoic principle. These are not affirmations in the sense of empty positive thinking. They are precise, philosophical tools designed to trigger a specific cognitive shift. When you feel the first sting of a critical comment, instead of letting your mind spiral into a story of catastrophe, you consciously insert one of these pre-rehearsed phrases. A powerful one is, "This is an external event. I control my internal response." This simple sentence acts as a circuit breaker, instantly cutting the power to the emotional hijack and rerouting your mental energy to your prefrontal cortex, where your reason and choice reside. The real power of this practice comes from integrating these reminders seamlessly into the fabric of your daily life, not just saving them for emergencies. You can turn your daily commute into a Stoic classroom by listening to a philosophy podcast. You can use mundane moments like waiting in line for coffee as a trigger to mentally rehearse your values. You can write a single principle on a sticky note and place it on your computer monitor where you'll see it throughout the day. The goal is to create a constant, gentle drip of Stoic wisdom into your subconscious mind, ensuring that this way of thinking is always at the forefront, ready to be deployed. The more you rehearse these truths in times of peace, the more reliably they will appear for you in times of war. So I want to leave you with a practical and personal question to make this layer your own. Don't just think about it, actively decide. What is one short, clear, and meaningful phrase you can arm yourself with? One you can repeat to yourself like a mantra the very next time criticism strikes. It should be a phrase that resonates deeply with you and encapsulates the Stoic truth you most need to remember. It could be, "My worth is internal." It could be, "This is data, not a verdict." Or it could be, "I choose my response." Find your phrase, write it down, and commit it to memory. This is your personal shield, forged in calmness, ready to be raised in an instant to protect your peace. Consider the case of Seneca the Younger, one of the most prominent Stoic philosophers and a wealthy advisor in the court of Emperor Nero. After years of immense influence, he suddenly found himself on the receiving end of the most severe criticism imaginable. He was accused of conspiracy against the emperor, a charge that carried the death penalty. The sentence was later commuted, but the result was nearly as catastrophic for a man of his status, exiled to the barren, remote island of Corsica for 8 long years. This wasn't just a professional setback, it was a complete and utter destruction of his public life, reputation, and comfort. Imagine the emotional whiplash, from being one of the most powerful men in Rome to being cast out to a desolate rock, stripped of everything, his name publicly dragged through the mud as a traitor. Now observe his response through the lens of the layers we've just built. This is where philosophy meets the fire of real life. He did not rage against the emperor. He did not write long, defensive letters trying to clear his name to anyone who would listen. He did not collapse into a pit of despair, lamenting the unfairness of it all. Instead, he turned inward to his Stoic practice. His writings from this period show a man applying cognitive distance with masterful precision. He separated the facts, "I have been sent to Corsica," from the catastrophic story, "My life is over and I am a disgraced man." He refused to let the external event of his exile dictate his internal state. He then retreated to his inner citadel, his core values, His worth, he reasoned, was not in his political position or his villas in Rome, but in his character, his virtue, and his ability to use his reason. This was the solid ground he stood upon, even as the world around him crumbled. Perhaps most remarkably, he engaged in a profound value assessment, embodying the dichotomy of control. In a lengthy letter of consolation to his mother, he didn't dwell on the things he had lost that were outside his control: his status, his possessions, his proximity to power. Instead, he focused intensely on what remained within his control: his attitude, his thoughts, his ability to study, to write, and to reflect. He famously wrote, "A prison is a place of forced confinement. But I have never felt less imprisoned than I do now." He transformed his exile from a punishment into an opportunity for uninterrupted philosophical contemplation and writing. He didn't just endure his fate, he used its raw materials to build something meaningful, producing some of his most profound work during this period. His calm was not the absence of feeling, but the presence of profound self-mastery. He accepted the reality of his situation without complaint and immediately set about figuring out how to live well within its new constraints, demonstrating that our freedom lies not in our circumstances, but in our chosen response to them. So how can you begin to emulate even a fraction of this profound calm in your own, far smaller challenges? You don't need to be exiled to practice this. The next time a critical email threatens to hijack your afternoon, or a harsh word from a colleague echoes in your mind, pause and ask yourself Seneca's silent question: what part of this situation can I actually command? Your boss's tone, their opinion of you, the words already sent. Those are the Corsica of your situation, the external realities you must accept, your own breath, your self-talk. Your decision to look for a useful lesson or to simply let it go, that is your inner citadel. Your power and your peace will always be found by building there, not by fruitlessly trying to change the weather outside. Now let's bring this ancient wisdom into the modern arena where criticism hits hardest and most frequently: the digital world. Online, judgment isn't just an occasional event, it's a constant, low-grade hum in the background of our lives. A negative comment on a post you shared, a harsh review of a project you poured your soul into, the silent judgment of a dip in followers. These digital interactions carry a unique psychological weight. The screen creates a dangerous illusion of intimacy and distance simultaneously. We feel the sting of the words personally, yet the critic is often a faceless stranger, separated by miles and a username, which somehow makes the feedback feel both more pervasive and more difficult to process. This environment demands a stronger, more practiced form of stoic detachment than ever before. Think about the specific mechanics of online criticism. It's often asynchronous, meaning you receive it alone, without the moderating influence of body language or tone. Someone can type a brutally harsh comment in 30 seconds and move on with their day, while you might spend 30 minutes or even 30 hours wrestling with the emotional fallout. It's also permanent and public, creating a sense of being exposed to a crowd. A negative review on a platform like Google or Yelp isn't just feedback, it's a public performance of your perceived failure for anyone to see. This combination of permanence, publicity, and anonymity creates a perfect storm for our ancient threat detection systems. Our amygdala doesn't understand the difference between a village elder publicly shaming us, which in the past could mean exile, and a one-star review from Cool Gamer 87. It triggers the same cascade of stress hormones, the same urge to either fight back with a defensive comment or flee by deleting the entire account. This is where Stoic layering becomes not just helpful but essential for digital survival. The first layer, cognitive distance, is your most vital tool. When you see a negative comment, your immediate job is to perform that forensic analysis right there on the screen. What are the literal words used? Separate them from the story your mind instantly wants to tell. The comment says, "This product is garbage and a waste of money." The story your ego writes is, "I am a failure, my work is worthless, and everyone will see this and agree." Your Stoic practice is to consciously interrupt that story. You say to yourself, "The factual event is that a username typed these words. My interpretation is that this means I have failed." These are two separate things. This simple act of mental separation creates the crucial space that prevents an emotional hijack. Then, apply the layer of assessing the critic's world. Online, this is more important than anywhere else. You must become a detective of context you don't have. That scathing review might have been written by someone who just had a terrible day and is taking it out on the first available target. The nasty comment on your social media post might come from a place of deep insecurity or envy within the commenter. The cancel culture mob mentality is often less about you and more about the mob's own need for belonging, righteousness, or power. As Marcus Aurelius might have observed, their actions reflect their own internal chaos, not your external value. This doesn't excuse poor behavior, but it does drain it of its personal power to wound you. You can look at a cruel comment and, rather than internalizing it, think, "This says nothing about me and everything about the pain this person must be carrying to write something like that to a stranger." The digital realm also demands a hyper-vigilant practice of the dichotomy of control. You must draw that bright line with absolute clarity. What is within your control? The quality of your work, your intention in putting it out there, your decision to engage or not, your choice to learn from constructive feedback. What is not within your control? The algorithms that decide who sees your work, the mood of a random stranger scrolling through their feed, the number of likes or positive comments, the existence of negative or hateful responses. Wasting your energy trying to control these externals by obsessively checking metrics, arguing with trolls, or tailoring your work solely to avoid criticism is like trying to control the weather. It's a guaranteed path to anxiety and burnout. Your peace lies in pouring your effort into your side of the line and releasing the rest into the digital ether, understanding that once you hit post, publish, or send, the outcome belongs to the world, not to you. So the next time you feel that familiar lurch in your stomach when a notification pops up, pause and ask yourself this guiding question. Before you even read the comment or review, take a breath and pose this internal query. Does this person's opinion hold the key to my self-worth, or am I handing them a key they haven't earned? This question forces you to consult your inner citadel before you open the gates to the digital noise. Your answer will determine whether you engage with the feedback from a place of curious strength or react to it from a place of fragile defensiveness. It reminds you that in a world of endless opinions, the only one that truly defines you is the one you hold about yourself, built on your own virtuous effort and intent. Think of these 12 layers not as separate tools, but as a single, integrated suit of armor that you learn to wear. Each layer is a different plate, designed to protect a specific part of you, and they all interlock to create a comprehensive defense. The cognitive layers creating distance, assessing value, and gaining perspective form the helmet and breastplate, protecting your mind and your core judgment. The emotional layers, detachment, forgiveness, and humor, are the chainmail and padding underneath, absorbing the shock and impact so it doesn't break your bones. And the behavioral layers, your ritualized pause, your crafted response, your selective silence, are the greaves and gauntlets, the part of the armor that moves and acts with intention in the world. Alone, a single gauntlet or a lone chest plate is vulnerable. A blow can slip through the gaps, but when they are all buckled on together, you become far more than the sum of the parts. You become a resilient, agile, and formidable presence, able to walk through any verbal battlefield unscathed. The true magic happens not when you think about each piece individually, but when you've practiced their integration so thoroughly that the entire process becomes second nature, a fluid and almost instantaneous reaction. It starts the moment the criticism lands. You don't have to consciously run through a 12-step checklist. Instead, it feels more like a single, cohesive motion. The sting hits, and in the space of a single breath, your entire system engages. Your ritualized pause creates the space. Your breath calms the nervous system. Your mind automatically separates the factual words from the emotional story. You instantly assess what is and isn't within your control. You consider the critic's potential context with a sense of curiosity rather than anger. You consult your inner citadel to reaffirm your virtue-based worth. You might even find a touch of lightheartedness to deflect any petty malice. And from that composed, centered place, you then choose your response, whether it's a thoughtful question to seek clarification, a simple "thank you for the feedback," or the powerful, strategic decision to say nothing at all. What once felt like a complex philosophical exercise now feels as natural and reflexive as catching a ball that's thrown at you. You don't calculate the trajectory, you just put your hand up. This level of seamless integration only comes from consistent, deliberate practice. You cannot wait for the big, painful criticism to start building your armor. You forge it in the small, daily moments. Practice cognitive distance on the slow driver who cuts you off in traffic. Practice emotional detachment on the minor, frustrating comment from a family member. Practice value assessment on a piece of trivial online feedback. Each time you consciously apply a single layer in a low-stakes situation, you are strengthening the neural pathway, making it easier to access when the stakes are high. This is the daily discipline of the Stoic. It's the commitment to treating every minor irritation, every slight, every moment of friction as a training ground for your character. The goal is to make these layered responses so habitual that they become your default setting, leaving your old, reactive patterns to wither away from lack of use. As you continue on this path, it's valuable to periodically take stock of your own progress. While the armor works best as a complete system, we all have pieces that feel more natural and others that need more reinforcement. So let's turn this inward for a moment with a final, guiding question. Look back over the layers we've explored together, from cognitive distance and the inner citadel to emotional detachment, value assessment, premeditation, virtue alignment, selective listening, temporal perspective, the sage ideal, response crafting, reframing obstacles, building support, releasing reputation, daily journaling, humble acceptance, physical discipline, the ritualized pause, Fati, light-hearted humor, internal forgiveness, and strategic silence. With quiet honesty, ask yourself, which single layer feels the most fragile on my own armor? Which one requires my conscious attention and dedicated practice right now to bring it up to the same strength as the others? Your honest answer to that question is your personal training manual, your direct map to the next stage of your growth toward becoming truly immune. This journey toward emotional resilience is incredibly powerful, but like any profound practice, it comes with its own set of subtle traps. It's entirely possible to misunderstand the tools and end up building walls where you meant to build foundations. One of the most common and damaging mistakes is to confuse the Stoic goal of emotional detachment with the act of emotional suppression. They might look similar on the surface, a calm face, a steady voice, but internally they are polar opposites. Suppression is about force. It's the act of feeling a powerful emotion like anger or hurt, and then consciously shoving it down, bottling it up, and pretending it doesn't exist. You might succeed in maintaining a composed exterior, but that suppressed energy doesn't vanish. It simply gets stored in the body, often resurfacing later as anxiety, resentment, or even physical illness. It's like trying to hold a beach ball underwater. It takes constant, exhausting effort, and the moment you slip, it explodes back to the surface with tremendous force. True Stoic detachment, on the other hand, is not about denying the feeling. It's about changing your relationship to it. It's the practice of allowing the emotion to arise, observing it with curiosity. Ah, there is anger, or I notice a feeling of hurt, and then consciously choosing not to be ruled by it. You acknowledge the weather without becoming the storm. The emotion is a wave, and you are the surfer learning to ride it without being pulled under. The goal is not numbness, it is profound clarity. You feel the sting of the criticism, you allow the physiological reaction to happen, but you insert that crucial pause that prevents the feeling from hijacking your judgment and dictating your actions. The feeling is a passenger in the car, not the driver. Suppression is a form of self-deception, while detachment is a form of self-mastery. Another perilous pitfall on this path is the risk of spiritual pride, a kind of arrogance in your own resilience. This is where Stoicism, if misunderstood, can curdle into a sense of cold superiority. You might start to view those who are visibly upset by criticism as weak or undisciplined, placing yourself on a philosophical pedestal. The ancient Stoics were acutely aware of this danger and issued constant warnings against it. Marcus Aurelius himself repeatedly reminded himself to avoid arrogance, writing notes to stay humble and connected to his common humanity. The philosopher Seneca cautioned that true wisdom is gentle and approachable, not harsh and dismissive. The goal of this practice is not to make you feel superior to others who are suffering, but to extend compassion, recognizing that their reaction is simply a different point on the same human journey. Your resilience is not a weapon to judge others with, but a tool to serve them better, as you can now respond to their turmoil from a place of stability rather than being triggered by it. This is why the ultimate aim of Stoic layering is not indifference, but calm engagement. It's the ability to remain fully present and participatory in a difficult conversation without being emotionally overthrown by it. Imagine a colleague gives you feedback that is partly valid but delivered with a strong undercurrent of personal malice. The unlayered response is to either crumble completely, taking all of it to heart, or to become defensive and attack back. The suppressed response is to stonewall, to shut down emotionally and offer a cold, okay, whatever. The arrogant response is to internally scoff and dismiss the person as beneath you. The stoically layered response is to engage calmly and discerningly. You actively listen, sifting the feedback with genuine curiosity. You might say, I appreciate you pointing out the issue with the data on slide 5. You're right, that was an error on my part, and I will correct it. I want to understand your perspective on the overall strategy. In this response, you have gracefully accepted the useful kernel of truth, the data error, which is within your control to fix, while simultaneously refusing to engage with or accept the malicious tone, which is not your burden to carry. You are fully engaged, professionally courteous, and intellectually honest, all while maintaining an unshakable inner peace. Finding this balance requires a commitment to rigorous self-honesty, a practice the Stoics called proseuche, or attention to oneself. It's a continuous, gentle audit of your own motives and reactions. After any encounter with criticism, it's valuable to take a private moment to reflect. Ask yourself, did I acknowledge my true emotional response, or did I try to suppress it? Did I respond from a place of quiet confidence, or from a place of hidden arrogance? Was I able to separate the useful data from the emotional noise? This isn't about self-flagellation. It's about calibration. It's how you ensure your inner compass remains true and your practice doesn't drift into the cold, dismissive territory of the intellectual ego. The guiding light through all of this is a single, powerful intention: to pursue virtue, not invulnerability. Your goal is to become a better, wiser, more compassionate person, not a perfectly impenetrable fortress. This intention naturally guards against coldness, because the virtues you are cultivating, wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance, are all social virtues, meant to be expressed in your engagement with the world and the people in it. So as you continue to build your resilience, regularly pause and ask yourself this essential question of integration. How can you ensure your Stoic practice remains a warm, discerning engagement with the world rather than a cold, dismissive retreat from it? Your answer will likely be found in your intention. Are you using these principles to wall yourself off or to show up more fully and effectively? True Stoic immunity doesn't make you less human. It allows you to be the most thoughtful, compassionate, and effective version of your human self, especially when faced with the slings and arrows of a critical world. So we've traveled a full journey together, haven't we? From that initial, visceral sting of a critical comment that can derail an entire day, all the way to understanding the powerful, layered practice that can make you truly immune. We started by uncovering the primal, hardwired reasons why criticism hurts so much, that ancient alarm system in our brain that mistakes a few harsh words for a threat of social exile. We saw how our ego and identity get tangled up in our work, making every critique feel like a verdict on our very being. But then we discovered the foundational Stoic shift, that our suffering doesn't come from the event itself, but from the judgment we place upon it. The criticism is just weather. Our reaction is the choice to either stand out in the storm or simply observe it from the shelter of our own mind. We then built your immunity, layer by practical layer. We began with cognitive distance, learning to separate the bare facts of what was said from the catastrophic story we instantly tell ourselves. We constructed an inner citadel, a fortress of self-worth built on our own virtues and efforts, making the applause or hisses of the outside world irrelevant. We mastered emotional detachment, not to become cold, but to create that vital pause between the spark of feeling and our chosen response. We learned to sift every piece of feedback with the question, does this help me grow? Keeping the gold and letting the mud wash away. We even practiced premeditation, mentally rehearsing challenges to drain them of their power to surprise us. This isn't a single magic trick. It's a comprehensive system, a suit of armor where each plate locks into the next, protecting you from the inside out. And the most crucial takeaway from all of this is that resilience is not a trait you're born with. It is not a genetic lottery that some people win and others lose. It is a skill, a craft built through consistent daily practice. It is the choice, moment by moment, to apply these layers even when it's difficult, especially when it's difficult. You start with a single layer. Maybe this week you just practice creating that cognitive distance, separating the fact from the story. Next week, you add the ritualized pause, taking that deep breath before you respond. You build gradually, brick by brick, until your inner citadel stands unshakable. This is the peace that comes from self-mastery, a truth echoed by Marcus Aurelius in his private writings. He reminded himself, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. The ultimate strength isn't in controlling the world around you, but in mastering the world within you. This is your path forward. It begins with a single step, a single choice to see the next piece of criticism not as a threat, but as an opportunity to practice, to strengthen your resolve, and to flex your newfound immunity. I would love to hear about your journey. What is the one layer you are committing to practice first? Share your experiences and your own strategies for handling criticism in the comments below. Your story could be the very thing that helps another viewer find their footing. If you found this guide valuable and want to continue building a more resilient, peaceful life, please subscribe and hit the notification bell. We have so many more Stoic strategies to explore together, turning ancient wisdom into your modern superpower. Thank you for watching, and remember, your peace is your greatest project.